The beauty of this ability is that it can create surprises in combat, making it so the opponent never knows which direction the attack will come from. However, this ability also has its limits. Lin Shu's control range is only within 100 meters around him. In other words, Lin Shu can pick up any random stone within 100 meters and shoot it at high speed toward a target 1,000 meters away. But once it passes the 100-meter mark, he can no longer change the stone's flight trajectory. Alternatively, he can pick up a stone within 100 meters, throw it, and move along with it. That way, he can maintain his influence over the stone as long as it stays within his 100-meter radius. Imagine this. If in combat, there are multiple daggers within 100 meters around Lin Shu, he could use them to surround his opponent and attack continuously. At the same time, he could alter the dagger's flight paths according to his opponent's and his own movements. But the combat advantage of this ability isn't what excites Lin Shu the most. What truly thrills him is that he can hover in the air for short periods. Flying. It's something countless people have dreamed of, especially for a boy from Xia country who grew up reading comics and watching movies about flying on swords. Just the thought of being able to fly himself is enough to make anyone's blood pump. Lin Shu slightly adjusted his thoughts. The snowboard under his feet slowly lifted off the ground, hovering in midair. The whole process lasted over 10 seconds. He was ecstatic. In that moment, he felt like a legendary immortal flying on a sword. But the joy was short-lived. Less than a minute later, the snowboard, moving at high speed, suddenly tilted sharply. He tried his best to balance the snowboard, but his body lost its equilibrium and he fell. A second later, with a thud, Lin Shu crashed into a snowbank, rolling a few times from the momentum. The rabbit mouse, which had been in Lin Shu's pocket keeping a lookout for mutated herbs, was also thrown out, caught off guard. It rolled a long way before coming to a stop. The Demon King dog beside him stopped, turning its head to look at its master lying in the snow. It seemed used to this bizarre sight by now, though the corners of its mouth kept twitching upward, unable to hold back a grin. Lin Shu stood up, brushing the snow off his body. Looking at the snowboard snapped in half, he smiled bitterly. To truly fly by controlling objects, he absolutely had to keep the controlled item stable while moving at high speeds. At the same time, his body had to maintain balance when the object shook. Controlling his spiritual power was indeed a massive challenge. It required extreme multitasking. He came up with an idea to improve his precision when controlling his spiritual power, the needle threading game. Using spiritual power to guide a thread through a tiny needle eye. This method could train his spiritual power control to the maximum precision. He also needed to practice more daily to balance his physical strength. This method would take time to master. The mouse in his hood pocket sank down, leaped onto Lin Shu's shoulder, and found a comfortable position to lie down. It just stared at the back of Lin Shu's neck with a somewhat resentful look. Lin Shu coughed lightly to hide his embarrassment. He took out an identical snowboard from his spatial storage to replace the broken one. Turning his head, he saw the Demon King's dog face looking like it wanted to laugh. Lin Shu raised an eyebrow. What's so funny? The Demon King quickly suppressed its smile. It neatly wrote a few words in the snow-covered ground. Master is so good at snowboarding. Lin Shu narrowed his eyes. Later, during their journey, Lin Shu also attached a snowboard to the Demon King. Its front paws were strapped to the board. The dog's legs trembled, but without hesitation, it dashed forward. Its four limbs went out of sync, and it face-planted into a snowbank, getting a mouthful of snow. This made Lin Shu burst out laughing. Amidst the fun, Lin Shu quickly detected a pack of Tier 3 origin beasts within his 10 kilometers spiritual power range. Perfect. Lin Shu's eyes lit up. Just in time to test my new ability. He stored the exhausted, panting Demon King into his spatial storage. With a mere thought, dozens of metal shards appeared around him. These metal fragments were sharp and jagged. They were the shattered pieces of the Qi Yun's sword after it had been tempered. It was a sharp weapon. Lin Shu had to use his giant hammer to break them apart. Ordinary daggers have limited damage against origin beasts. Right now, he didn't want to return to Sha City to have Old Man Li forge a weapon, so he could only make do with the Qi Yun's sword. Of course, it was just a separated replica. These metal shards hovered around Lin Shu, ready for battle. He didn't stop. The snowboard carved a smooth curve on the snow, quickly chasing after the pack of Tier 3 origin beasts. The origin beasts caught the scent of a human and charged toward Lin Shi. As expected of Sichuan province's origin beasts, the dozen or so beasts were all tigers, lions, and leopards, with the highest being at the general rank. This was just the outskirts of Sichuan province. Lin Shi looked at the charging pack of origin beasts, his eyes sharp. Just as the two sides were about to clash, Lin Shi shifted his feet, launching himself into the air over the pack. At the same time, he clenched his right fist. The metal shards moving with him seemed to be infused with power, shooting toward the dozen origin beasts. The two sides crossed paths in an instant. Lin Shi landed steadily behind the pack. As for the origin beasts, it was as if someone hit pause and then play again. Fresh blood sprayed everywhere. The beasts collapsed to the ground in various poses, unable to move. A second later, the blood-stained metal shards flew back to Lin Shi's side. In the blink of an eye, Lin Shi had taken care of the entire pack. He had used dozens of metal shards, each slashing into the beasts' bodies dozens of times. Over 10 shards were still lodged inside their corpses. Lin Shi turned around, delivering a few more strikes to the origin beasts that weren't completely dead yet, then retrieved the metal shards. Just that one move had cost him several thousand points of origin power. If his control were more precise, aiming for the beast's fatal weak points, he would have saved a lot more origin power. However, Lin Shi was still very satisfied with the destructive power of this move. He decided to name it Metal Storm. After collecting the origin beast corpses into his spatial storage, Lin Shi left. It was getting late. He needed to find a safe shelter. Somewhere in Sichuan province, in a ruined house, a man sneaked out from underground. He ran upstairs to check if the heavy snow had buried the house, then observed the surroundings. Once certain there was no danger, he ran down to the basement and shouted, "Come out." Not long after, a woman and a teenager around 16 or 17 emerged from the basement. Not all survivors in Sichuan province had evacuated. Xiao Hui's family lived in the remote suburbs and hadn't gone into the city. They relied on their basement and stockpiled food to survive. They didn't fight for food or shelter with others. Because of this, when the military evacuated, Xiao Hui's family was left behind without even knowing it. Only Xiao Hui was a Tier 1 evolver. Both his parents were ordinary people. Sichuan province had been overrun by origin beasts for months, yet this family was still surviving just fine. "Xiao Hui, go check if Xiao Ciyuan is nearby," Xiao Hui's father said. Xiao Hui nodded, went up to the third floor, climbed out the skylight, and jumped down. The thick snow had almost completely buried the house. If they didn't clear the snow regularly, they would have been buried alive. Landing on the ground, Xiao Hui put his fingers to his mouth and let out a sharp whistle. The whistle echoed through the snowy landscape. Xiao Hui looked around nervously, searching for the figure he was hoping to see. His eyes were full of worry and anxiety, but also brimming with hope. A few minutes later, just as Xiao Hui was about to whistle again, a noise came from the distance. A black and white figure was running toward him. Seeing that silhouette, Xiao Hui's eyes lit up. "Xiao Ciyuan." Hearing the call, the figure ran faster, rushing right up to Xiao Hui. It was a giant panda, an adult Tier 4 giant panda. The panda stopped beside Xiao Hui, gently rubbing against him. Xiao Hui tenderly stroked the giant panda's fur, whispering, "Long time no see. Did you miss me?" The giant panda nodded. It clearly understood human speech. At this moment, his mother's urging voice echoed from behind the skylight. "Xiao Hui, hurry up. Don't waste time. Let it go find food for us. If our scent is picked up by other beasts, we're in trouble." Xiao Hui's parents wanted to use this giant panda to find food. It turned out that even though Xiao Hui's family had a habit of stockpiling food, and despite rationing as much as possible since the apocalypse began, their supplies eventually ran out. It had been almost a year since the apocalypse. No matter how much they had hoarded initially, it was all gone. In fact, just 2 months after the apocalypse broke out, the food in Xiao Hui's house had run out. With no other choice, Xiao Hui had to go out with his father to scavenge for food. Whether it was luck or not, they stumbled upon an injured giant panda and a dead panda cub on the road. The giant panda was very weak. At the time, Xiao Hui's father was starving and immediately rushed forward to kill it. But he was stopped by Xiao Hui, a kind-hearted kid. It's Xia country's national treasure. Xiao Hui didn't want to see such an adorable animal die before his eyes, let alone eat its meat. Right then, Xiao Hui accidentally unlocked his Tier 1 gene lock. Despite his father's fierce opposition, Xiao Hui refused to let him harm the giant panda. He even used a needle and thread to stitch up the panda's wounds, then let it carry its cub away. That day, the father and son returned empty-handed, and for the whole week after that as well. Xiao Hui was scolded by his parents. If they had killed that giant panda and brought it back, it would have been enough to feed them for at least a month. Just when they were completely out of food, the father and son suddenly found the corpse of a mutated monkey at their doorstep. And in the distance, they saw the giant panda that Xiao Hui had saved. From then on, Xiao Hui grew close to this giant panda and named it Xiao Xiyuan. Later, Xiao Hui's parents ordered him to use this giant panda to get food. Every 10 days or half a month, it would bring back a beast carcass. Every time the giant panda got injured, Xiao Hui would treat its wounds. And over the next half year, the giant panda grew larger and larger. Hearing his mother's urging from behind, a look of guilt flashed in Xiao Hui's eyes, but he still opened his mouth to speak. Xiao Xiyuan, could you please find a wild beast for us? I'm hungry. The giant panda nuzzled Xiao Hui, then turned and walked away. Xiao Hui watched the giant panda's fading silhouette and sighed. If it weren't for the apocalypse, he and Xiao Xiyuan would probably have met at a zoo, separated by a glass fence. Xiao Xiyuan would be leisurely eating fresh green bamboo before the sun came up, then playing pranks for the visitors to see. It would be free and carefree, not like now, being ordered around. Getting hurt for him. Glancing at his parents waiting outside, Xiao Hui pursed his lips and went back inside. More than half a day later, there was a noise outside the room. Xiao Hui hurriedly opened the window and jumped down. Seeing the bloody wounds all over the giant panda, Xiao Hui's heart sank. Xiao Xiyuan, you're hurt. The giant panda was carrying a mutated antelope in its mouth. It dropped it on the ground. The antelope's horns were very sharp, but the wounds on the giant panda clearly weren't caused by this antelope. The giant panda urgently cried out to Xiao Hui, then turned to run. But before it could get far, a Tier 4 tiger blocked its path. As soon as the Tier 4 tiger appeared, Xiao Hui's parents, who were initially thrilled to see Xiao Xiyuan bring food, were now trembling with fear. Xiao Hui's mother let out a choked scream, but his father quickly covered her mouth. Get back. Let that panda lure the tiger away. Xiao Hui's father barked. Xiao Hui was also so scared his legs turned to jelly. Unlike the usually friendly Xiao Xiyuan, this Tier 4 tiger exuded an overwhelming murderous aura. Its blood-red eyes looked at them. These humans were just little chicks it could crush at any moment. But a look of conflict flashed in Xiao Hui's eyes, and he didn't move. Xiao Xiyuan was no match for this tiger. If he let it lure the tiger away, it would die. If it dies, it dies. Is a beast's life worth more than a human's? What time is it to be thinking about that? Hurry up. Xiao Hui looked at the panda and the tiger facing off. Thinking of the months he had spent with the panda, Xiao Hui gritted his teeth and said, No, I have to help Xiao Xiyuan. This tiger has already spotted us. If Xiao Xiyuan dies, we die too. Xiao Hui was indeed more clear-headed than his parents. Dad, throw me the knife I made. Xiao Hui's father hesitated for a long time, but finally gritted his teeth and threw Xiao Hui's crude, homemade knife to him. Xiao Hui gripped the thick, bone-chopping knife and carefully approached the battlefield between the panda and the tiger. By now, the panda and the tiger were already fighting. A battle between primal beasts was incredibly bloody. Xiao Hui, a Tier 1 evolver, was almost useless in a fight between two Tier 4 beasts. All he could do was harass the tiger from the sidelines. Once the fight began, the panda was indeed outmatched, and it repeatedly protected Xiao Hui from the tiger's attacks. But Xiao Hui cleverly seized the right moments, briefly unlocking his gene lock to create openings for the panda to strike. In the end, the panda defeated the powerful tiger. But unfortunately, after snapping the tiger's neck, the panda also collapsed to the ground. Its injuries were too severe. Xiao Xiyuan. Xiao Hui gritted his teeth, fighting through the aftereffects of unlocking his gene lock, and rushed to the panda's side. The panda's injuries were much worse than when Xiao Hui first met it. Its body was covered in massive, torn wounds, and in many places, entire chunks of flesh were missing, exposing the white bone underneath. Xiao Hui was heartbroken. He suddenly remembered that eating origin beast meat could help wounds heal faster, so he hurriedly grabbed his knife to cut some tiger meat. But even though the Tier 4 tiger was dead, its hide wasn't something Xiao Hui's ordinary kitchen knife could easily cut through. Xiao Hui struggled immensely just to cut a small piece of meat from the wound where the panda had bitten it. He quickly ran back to the panda and placed the meat into Xiao Siyuan's mouth. Xiao Siyuan was very obedient, gently chewing the meat, but its eyes were growing dimmer by the second. Its body was losing a lot of blood. There were too many large wounds, and its natural healing ability couldn't stop the bleeding. Xiao Hui thought he needed to stitch up the panda's wounds first, so he said, "Xiao Siyuan, wait a moment. I'll go get a needle and thread to stitch you up." At that moment, Xiao Hui's mother had quietly come up behind him and pulled him back. "It's too badly injured. It can't be saved. Let's just put it out of its misery." His mother spoke in a gentle tone, but her face was full of anxiety. The smell of blood is too strong. Who knows when other origin beasts will catch the scent and come. Xiao Hui's father, who was busy digging a hole, called out, "Xiao Hui, come help me quickly. Throw this meat in. We need to get back to the basement fast. As long as Xiao Siyuan eats some meat, it will slowly recover. We can't just leave it here. With the smell of blood this strong, it will definitely attract other origin beasts," Xiao Hui's father said with a grim expression. "Either leave it be, and we finish dealing with this tiger and bury it, or we kill this panda too. Dad, Xiao Siyuan got hurt because of us. You want to kill it?" Xiao Hui looked at his father in disbelief, unable to understand how the man he always respected could say something so cold-blooded. If it hadn't lured that tiger here, we would have already brought the meat back to the basement by now. Xiao Hui didn't expect his mother to say the same thing. He looked at his parents in disbelief. For the first time, they felt like strangers to him. If it weren't for Xiao Siyuan's help, their family would have starved to death or been eaten by origin beasts long ago. Now, not only were they refusing to save Xiao Siyuan, but they also wanted to kill it. How could people be so ungrateful? Xiao Hui didn't care anymore. He turned to go back to his room to find the needle and thread. But suddenly, a sharp pain hit the back of his neck. His father had sneaked up behind him and knocked him out with a single strike. Xiao Hui had no guard up against his parents, so he instantly fell unconscious. "You take Xiao Hui back first. I'll finish dealing with this panda," Xiao Hui's father told his mother. By now, the panda was on its last breath. Seeing Xiao Hui get struck by his father, the panda struggled to stand up, but collapsed back onto the ground. Xiao Hui's father picked up Xiao Hui's homemade knife and walked over to the panda. Looking into the panda's lively, seemingly intelligent eyes, he hesitated for a moment. "Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being careless and luring that tiger here. He loves Xiao Siyuan so much, he'll definitely understand. If I don't kill you and bury you properly, the smell of your blood will attract other origin beasts. Xiao Hui will be in danger and die. Xiao Hui is my son. I have to protect him, just like you wanted to protect your cub. You understand, right?" Xiao Hui's father's hands trembled slightly, not out of pity, but out of fear that the panda might counterattack before dying. But the panda seemed to understand his words, especially when he mentioned its cub. The panda's eyes instantly dimmed. It watched the fading silhouette of Xiao Hui's mother carrying him away, then closed its eyes. Xiao Hui's father secretly rejoiced. He raised the knife and slashed hard at the panda's neck, right where the tiger had bitten it earlier. But just then, a furious roar echoed from the distance, causing the knife in his hand to slip, only cutting into the panda's fur. He looked up. In the distance, another giant panda was galloping toward them. Xiao Hui's father was so terrified he dropped the knife. He tried to run, but was shoved to the ground. And the owner of that furious roar quickly closed in. Tyrant opened its mouth and lunged to bite the man. Tyrant was completely different now from its usual obedient, gentle, and cheerful self. Its normally round eyes were bloodshot. Its mouth was wide open, its lower jaw stretched almost to the maximum. Its sharp fangs looked ready to crush Xiao Hui's father's head entirely. Seeing a giant maw lunging at him, Xiao Hui's father thought he was dead for sure. He closed his eyes in terror, waiting for the end. "Tyrant!" Lin Shi's voice rang out from behind Tyrant. He had followed Tyrant all the way here. After entering Sichuan province, He initially used his metal storm to get used to his new ability. But later, as the number of origin beasts increased, Lin Shi sent out his origin beast army to fight. Fighting these wild origin beasts, although the beasts in Sichuan province were numerous, they couldn't match Lin Shi's origin beast army in numbers. They also lacked the teamwork and tactical proficiency of Lin Shi's army. Basically, Lin Shi swept through everything in his path, eating whatever he could, and storing the inedible ones in his spatial storage to take away. While he hadn't discovered the Beast King yet, Lin Shi just led his origin beast army to level up and grind mobs. Halfway through, Tyrant seemed to notice something and recklessly ran off in one direction. Lin Shi thought Tyrant had found something, so he recalled his origin beast army, mounted the Demon King, and chased after it. And so, they arrived here. From a distance, Lin Shi had already used his spiritual power to see the scene in front of Xiao Hui's house. He also understood why Tyrant had recklessly run here. Because there was one of Tyrant's kind here. Since Sha City was too hot, the zoo didn't have any giant pandas. Previously, Lin Shi had wondered where Tyrant had run from when he found it. Now he had his answer. Tyrant had run all the way from Sichuan province. Tyrant knew this giant panda. Tyrant, who was already looking anxious, instantly went into a berserk state when it saw the dying giant panda in the snow. It almost lost its mind. Hearing Lin Shi's voice, Tyrant's bloodshot eyes regained a bit of sanity. It switched from biting to swatting, sending Xiao Hui's father, who was standing there like a statue, flying with a single paw strike. Then it went to the dying giant panda's side, whimpering continuously, gently nudging Xiao Siyuan with its head. Catching Tyrant's scent, the giant panda, Xiao Siyuan, who had already closed its eyes, suddenly opened them. Like a stagnant pool suddenly receiving a flowing stream, it came back to life, whimpering in response. Hearing Tyrant's roar, Xiao Hui's mother stopped in her tracks. Seeing her husband sent flying, she let out a scream and fainted. Xiao Hui also fell off her back. By this time, Lin Shi, riding the Demon King, had arrived beside Tyrant. Seeing Tyrant's reaction, he knew he absolutely had to intervene. "Don't worry, I'll save it," Lin Shi softly comforted Tyrant. Lin Shi checked the giant panda's wounds. The injuries were massive, and some were very deep. First, he said to the giant panda, "I'm going to treat your wounds. Don't thrash around, and don't attack me. If you understand, blink twice." The giant panda obediently blinked twice. Seeing this, Lin Shi felt much more relieved. Being able to communicate was a good sign. But the Demon King still walked over to the giant panda vigilantly, staring at it. It seemed that if the panda showed any intent to attack, it would be killed on the spot. Lin Shi turned his back, casually taking a needle and thread from his spatial storage. He skillfully stitched up the giant panda's wounds, then took out some gene medicine, crushed it, and sprinkled it over the injuries. A moment later, the wounds stopped bleeding. Lin Shi took out a few gene pills and placed them near the giant panda's mouth. "Eat this. You'll heal faster." The giant panda obediently licked up the gene pills. "All done. Don't worry. Just rest for a while and you'll recover." Lin Shi turned back to reassure Tyrant, noticing its anxious gaze fixed on the giant panda. Tyrant looked at Lin Shi, its eyes welling with tears, filled with gratitude. Tyrant had always been rather aloof, or rather, proud and disobedient. Even though Lin Shi provided it with food and shelter, Lin Shi always felt their relationship was one of equals. Tyrant's attitude toward him was completely different from the Demon King, the Clouded Leopard, or the Long-Armed Ape. The Demon King was loyal to Lin Shi. The Clouded Leopard and the Long-Armed Ape feared him. But Tyrant always treated Lin Shi as a friend, not a master. But from this moment on, Lin Shi felt Tyrant's attitude change. Before, if they encountered a life-or-death situation, Tyrant might have abandoned Lin Shi and fled. But from now on, it wouldn't. He saw the exact same light in Tyrant's eyes as in the Demon King's, approval and trust. Whimper, whimper, Tyrant gently rubbed against Lin Shi. It raised a paw, pointing at the giant panda in front of them, then pointed at Lin Shi. "You want me to take it with us?" Lin Shi realized the injured panda was female and an adult. Could this be Tyrant's mother? He considered the possibility. He crouched down, looking at the giant panda whose spirit had improved significantly, though it still couldn't stand up. Are you willing to come with me? Lin Shi patted Tyrant. It's my friend. Are you willing to join us and become a member of my group of friends? The giant panda glanced at Tyrant, its eyes full of affection, and nodded without hesitation. Lin Shi smiled. Nowadays, subduing a Tier 4 origin beast was extremely difficult. Along the way, Lin Shi had never managed to subdue a single Tier 4 origin beast. Low-tier origin beasts took a lot of time and resources to nurture and provided little boost to Lin Shi's combat power. The higher the tier of the origin beast, the higher its intelligence, making it harder to submit to humans. Most of the origin beasts in his army had been subdued when they were below Tier 3. Subduing a Tier 4 origin beast with so little effort was truly a great achievement. With a little nurturing, it would become a core combat asset. No, you can't take Xiao Ziyuan away. Xiao Hui, who had been pretending to be unconscious, couldn't keep up the act anymore when he heard Lin Shi's words. He scrambled up. Ever since his mother fainted, he had fallen into the snow. The freezing cold had woken him up. Seeing Tyrant appear, Xiao Hui only had time to close his eyes and play dead. Other than Xiao Ziyuan, Xiao Hui knew that any origin beast was hostile toward humans. He planned to pretend to be unconscious to avoid this giant panda, waiting for it to leave before saving his parents. He didn't expect to hear Lin Shi and the Demon King's voices. This time, Xiao Hui dared not make a move. Later, when Lin Shi turned his back, Xiao Hui peeked through a slit in his eyes to observe. He never expected there to be someone in the world who could be so close to such ferocious origin beasts, and two of them, at that. This person could even communicate with origin beasts and roam the wilderness. This was exactly the dream he had always yearned for. Xiao Ziyuan is my friend. Xiao Hui stubbornly looked straight into Lin Shi's eyes. Because his parents had always drilled into his head the idea that origin beasts ate humans, Xiao Hui had never thought about taming origin beasts to serve him. But now, witnessing the intimate bond between Lin Shi, the Demon King, and Tyrant, a fire ignited in his heart. If someone else could rely on origin beasts to survive in this harsh apocalypse, then he definitely could too. Every teenage boy dreams of becoming strong. Xiao Hui was no exception. So, hearing Lin Shi say he wanted to take Xiao Ziyuan away, Xiao Hui couldn't pretend anymore. He stood up, ignoring the danger. Lin Shi had long noticed this teenager pretending to be unconscious. He rarely attacked people unless they posed a threat to him. Along the way, other than this family of three, Lin Shi hadn't seen any other humans. The living space for humanity seemed to have been squeezed to an alarming degree by the freezing cold and the origin beasts. Seeing the family of three from a distance, Lin Shi was quite surprised. How did they survive in a place swarming with origin beasts? Now he understood. It turned out they relied on that giant panda to survive. It's your companion? I saw your father about to kill it just now. Lin Shi frowned at the teenager, a Tier 1 evolver who was trembling but still bravely stood up. When Xiao Hui's father was about to kill the panda, Xiao Hui had been knocked out, so he hadn't seen anything. Xiao Hui shook his head. No, my dad. Xiao Hui suddenly remembered what his parents had said before he passed out. Either let it go right now, and we deal with that tiger and bury it, or we kill this panda too. Xiao Hui recalled the moment his father knocked him out. His father's actions were very likely exactly as Lin Shi described. He couldn't refute it, but he remained stubborn. I am me, and my dad is my dad. I won't let anyone hurt Xiao Ziyuan. Uffed. Lin Shi couldn't help but laugh. What are you going to protect it with? With your pathetic strength, getting knocked out by an ordinary person? Lin Shi mocked, provoking the teenager's pride. Xiao Hui glared at Lin Shi and retorted fiercely. Then what gives you the right to take Xiao Ziyuan away? You're human too. Lin Shi picked up the bone-chopping knife Xiao Hui's father had thrown on the ground. He bent the knife with his bare hands as easily as bending a chicken bone. Xiao Hui's eyes widened in disbelief, his jaw dropping in shock. I'm different from you. My companions protect me, and I protect them. Lin Shi tossed the knife, now a piece of scrap metal, onto the ground. But, seeing how strong Lin Shi was, Xiao Hui grew a bit anxious. He thought he had found a way to become stronger and survive the apocalypse. How could he give up so easily? Xiao Hui argued. Were you born this strong? If I have Xiao Ziyuan, one day I'll be as strong as you. Besides, you already have two companions. Why force Xiao Siyuan to go with you? Without it, my whole family will die. Lin Shi knew there was no reasoning with this teenager. A look of impatience flashed in his eyes. Just then, the giant panda lying on the ground spoke up. Whimper, whimper. After eating the gene medicine, the panda had recovered a bit. It struggled to stand up, slowly. Xiao Siyuan approached. Seeing the giant panda walking toward him, Xiao Hui's eyes lit up. He glanced at Lin Shi with a smug look. See? Xiao Siyuan supports me. You can't force a bond. Understand. Lin Shi remained silent. But the giant panda walked past Xiao Hui. The giant panda rubbed against Xiao Hui, its eyes gentle, yet filled with the sorrow of parting. Xiao Hui's heart skipped a beat. The giant panda turned around. Xiao Siyuan. The giant panda looked back at Xiao Hui once. No matter how much Xiao Hui called from behind, it didn't turn back again, resolutely walking toward Lin Shi, or more accurately, toward Tyrant. Xiao Hui panicked and rushed in front of the giant panda to stop it. Xiao Siyuan, have you forgotten how I saved you? The giant panda indeed stopped. Animals' emotions are always very pure. If it hadn't met Lin Shi, hadn't met Tyrant, perhaps the giant panda would have spent its whole life repaying Xiao Hui's kindness. But now it had found its cub, its only surviving child. A hint of guilt flashed in the giant panda's eyes. At that moment, Lin Shi's cold voice rang out. If I'm not mistaken, you guys have been surviving off this giant panda all this time, right? You just said, without it, you'd die. In other words, it has saved you many times. And yet you consider it a friend? What can you give it? You use it until it has no value left, then kill it and eat its meat. Just like earlier. Every word Lin Shi spoke was like a bullet piercing straight into Xiao Hui's heart. Xiao Hui was suddenly jolted awake, realizing he had become the kind of person he hated the most. His arms, spread wide to block the giant panda, suddenly dropped to his sides. The giant panda rubbed against Xiao Hui once more, then firmly walked toward Tyrant. This time, Xiao Hui didn't stop it. Lin Shi looked at the dazed teenager, ignored him, and led the three origin beasts away. At that moment, footsteps echoed behind him. Xiao Hui chased after them. Lin Shi emphasized, Xiao Siyuan, you must protect yourself. If you're in danger, run. Don't be stubborn, you hear me? Remember that. My name is Chen Xiaohui. You have to remember me. Xiao Hui didn't chase too closely, standing over 10 meters away and shouting. It was his final farewell to the giant panda. The giant panda turned its head and whimpered a few times toward Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui smiled, waving vigorously at the giant panda. The smart boy understood that losing the giant panda meant his family would likely soon end up like the other people in Sichuan, dead. But the boy also knew he couldn't rely on Xiao Siyuan for his whole life. Otherwise, this scene would just repeat itself. He had to become strong. Strong enough to protect his friends. Standing in the snow, watching Xiao Siyuan walk away, tears welled up in Xiao Hui's eyes. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he heard a voice in the wind. Northwest. 3 kilometers away, there's a tiger cub. If you're fast, you might find it before other origin beasts eat it. Xiao Hui froze for a moment, then his eyes lit up. He decisively ran toward the northwest. If it was a tiger cub, he would definitely protect it, raise it, and become friends with it. Once they were a bit further away, Lin Shi explained the spatial storage situation to Xiao Siyuan, then stored both Tyrant and Xiao Siyuan inside. Xiao Siyuan was heavily injured and needed rest. With Tyrant by its side, Xiao Siyuan wouldn't feel anxious about the sudden change in environment. Over the next few days, Lin Shi actively hunted origin beasts. He hunted many different types of origin beasts. The clouded leopard and the long-armed ape each gained a few more origin beast subordinates. Unfortunately, he didn't see any more giant pandas. By the third day, Lin Shi encountered fewer and fewer origin beasts. This made Lin Shi secretly vigilant. By the fourth day, Xiao Siyuan's injuries had improved significantly. Thanks to continuously eating origin beast meat and its strong natural healing ability, Xiao Siyuan was able to leave the spatial storage and fight alongside Tyrant. That day, when Lin Shi and his origin beast army appeared in the wilderness, he noticed something unusual. Stop! Everyone, gather around. Lin Shi called back the clouded leopard, which had wanted to run wild like an untamed horse the moment it left the spatial storage. The Demon King looked at Lin Shi with confusion. Lin Shi said, were surrounded. Within Lin Shi's spiritual power range, a pack of origin beasts was sprinting toward him. They spread out into an encirclement, aiming to surround Lin Shi and his entire origin beast army. Hunting for 3 days, and the mastermind finally shows up. Following Lin Shi's command, the clouded leopard immediately drew closer. With a mere thought, Lin Shi stored all the origin beasts except the Demon King into his spatial storage, then mounted the Demon King to break out of the encirclement first. The number of origin beasts scanned by his spiritual power reached 600 to 700, and the number was still growing. Among them were many Tier 3 and Tier 4 origin beasts, and even a Tier 5 one. Lin Shi naturally couldn't recklessly fight against such overwhelming odds. That Beast King was very likely a high-tier origin beast with high intelligence and tactical knowledge. However, it couldn't have expected Lin Shi to have a spatial storage that could hold all his origin beasts, allowing him to come and go as he pleased. After riding the Demon King to quickly escape the encirclement, Lin Shi planned to circle around behind the beast pack to see what this Beast King of Sichuan province looked like. He also wanted to see if he could kill the Beast King right then and there. Without a leader, the beast pack would fall into chaos. But before he could circle around, he was chased by another pack of origin beasts. He and the Demon King had been spotted. "They're chasing us again. Keep your distance first." Lin Shi patted the Demon King's neck. The Demon King panted, sprinting as fast as lightning. As a Tier 5 origin beast specializing in speed, a pack of origin beasts trying to surround and kill Lin Shi and the Demon King couldn't possibly catch up. However, Lin Shi didn't let the Demon King run too fast, maintaining a distance of just over 1,000 meters from the beast pack. He took out a massive, custom-made crossbow from his spatial storage, which he had crafted before leaving his shelter. He took out an extremely sharp spiral steel bolt, aimed at a Tier 3 origin beast chasing from behind, and pulled the trigger. A Tier 3 origin beast was hit by the bolt, dying instantly and collapsing to the ground. It caused a few origin beasts chasing behind it to trip and fall. Lin Shi took out another spiral steel bolt from his spatial storage, aimed, and fired. Aimed again, fired again. After consecutively killing dozens of Tier 2 and Tier 3 origin beasts, a roar echoed from the back of the beast pack. Immediately after, Lin Shi spotted a Tier 5 leopard charging from the rear of the pack. Lin Shi immediately urged the Demon King to speed up, widening the gap, then drew an origin power arrow from his spatial storage. It was a Tier 5 speed-type origin beast. The Tier 5 leopard couldn't catch up to the Demon King. It could only struggle to maintain the distance. The appearance of this leopard made Lin Shi guess that the Beast King was on the other side. In the same beast pack, 2 Beast Kings of the same tier would definitely fight to the death. The coexistence of 2 Tier 5 origin beasts in the pack could only prove that there was an even higher tier existence commanding them. Whoosh! The arrow, brimming with immense energy, vanished from Lin Shi's sight the moment he pulled the trigger, instantly piercing the back of the pursuing Tier 5 leopard. The Tier 5 leopard sensed the danger, but it was too late. Over 1,000 meters was too close for this crossbow. The powerful penetrating force pierced through the leopard's forehead in an instant, exiting near its tailbone. The arrow then embedded itself into a Tier 3 origin beast chasing behind it. Due to momentum, the leopard continued to lunge forward, but only managed to run another dozen meters before collapsing, dead as a doornail. Fresh blood poured from its body. With a mere thought, Lin Shi stored the Tier 5 leopard and the Tier 3 origin beast hit by the arrow into his spatial storage. By feeding this Tier 5 leopard to the Demon King, it could almost evolve to Tier 6. Currently, his spiritual power range extended to 2 kilometers. Any dead object within this 2-kilometer range could be stored in his spatial storage. The origin beasts he had killed earlier were also collected. The death of the Tier 5 leopard caused another roar to erupt from the rear of the beast pack. The beast pack chasing Lin Shi suddenly stopped, then simultaneously retreated. Lin Shi thought they had given up, but he wasn't going to let this pack of origin beasts go. Such high-tier origin beasts were a shortcut to rapidly increasing his strength. He planned to pursue and continue his guerrilla tactics. Just then, a Tier 2 origin beast ran out from the pack, heading alone toward Lin Shi. Lin Shi's eyes flashed, and he raised his crossbow. Unexpectedly, Seeing this, the monkey was so terrified it jumped up and turned to run back. At that moment, another roar came from the rear of the pack. The fleeing monkey suddenly stopped, then ran back toward Lin Shi. Lin Shi's eyes flashed, and he lowered his crossbow. A Tier 2 origin beast was easy to kill, but this monkey clearly wasn't coming to seek death. Lin Shi wanted to see what the Beast King had sent a Tier 2 origin beast to do. Under Lin Shi's observation, the trembling monkey ran to about a dozen meters away from Lin Shi and didn't dare advance any further. It threw an object onto the ground and began to back away until it was dozens of meters away. Lin Shi used his spiritual power to look at the object. It was a piece of paper. Without even picking it up, Lin Shi could see the 4 crooked words written on it. Human, get lost. These 4 words took up the entire piece of paper, written very large. An ordinary person couldn't write as beautifully as a drawing like this. He was almost certain this note was written by the Beast King. This left Lin Shi astounded. Besides the Demon King, there was actually another origin beast that could write. And the handwriting was even more refined than the Demon King's. Writing on paper with an origin beast's body required incredibly strong control over one's own strength. A Tier 6 Beast King. Lin Shi couldn't think of any other origin beast capable of doing this. The last time he encountered a Tier 6 mutated plant, it was terrifying. Was this Tier 6 Beast King the same? An origin beast that knew how to write was truly bizarre. If someone had taught it, that would be one thing. But this Sichuan province was remote and almost uninhabited. If it learned on its own, that would be terrifying. Lin Shi thought for a moment. He took out a pen and paper from his spatial storage, wrote a few words, crumpled the paper into a ball, and threw it toward the messenger monkey. The monkey jumped up, quickly picked up the paper ball, and ran off. Before long, a screech came from the back of the beast pack. The sound seemed somewhat angry. Lin Shi looked intrigued. He wanted to see if that Beast King could read and understand what he wrote. So, he had written on the paper, "You're the one who should get lost." If the other party understood what he wrote, it meant this Beast King was smarter than he thought. That way, he would have a chance to communicate with it and find a way to subdue this Tier 6 origin beast. Lin Shi's eyes showed clear determination. He patted the Demon King and said, "Let's go. We're heading home." Today's harvest was quite plentiful. He wanted to let the Demon King evolve to Tier 6. He needed overwhelming strength to conquer this Beast King. As soon as Lin Shi left, the Beast King, who had been hiding at the back of the pack, stepped out. Surprisingly, it was a petite and cute giant panda. But around it, all the origin beasts, which were twice its size, respectfully made way for it. That attitude showed that this tiny giant panda was the ruler of the beast pack, the Tier 6 Beast King. At this moment, the Beast King didn't look angry at all. In its round eyes was a gleam of cunning. "Slyness, my name is Hualan. I used to be a happy giant panda living in a panda reserve. Since birth, I was well taken care of by humans. But I don't know if the heavens were unfair to me. I was different from other giant pandas. From the moment I was born, I was smaller than the other origin beasts, and as I grew, it became more obvious. My limbs were short and small, my mouth couldn't open wide, and I couldn't bite as hard as my siblings. To be precise, I was a giant panda that couldn't survive in the wild. But I was also lucky, because I wasn't born in the wild, but in this panda reserve. I didn't need to find my own food, nor did I have to face the threat of other wild beasts. Every day, someone brought food to me. Unlike being constantly bullied in the pack, humans seemed to really like me. Every time my mom and I went for a walk, people would gather around to watch us. They always called my name and took pictures of me. Wherever I went, they followed. I had a caretaker. Everyone called her Lanzi. Her name also had the word Lan in it, just like mine. Lan was also the first Chinese character I learned. I learned it from Lanzi's staff ID, Chun Tsulan. Those 3 characters. As I grew up, I understood human speech and recognized some words. For example, every day Lanzi would take out a small notebook and record my health stats. Weight, 48 kilograms. Bowel movements, normal. Diet. Lanzi saw that I liked words, so sometimes she would proactively show them to me and explain what was written on them. Just like that, I grew up here, separated from my mom, and got my own enclosure. At first, I thought this peaceful life would just go on like this. Wake up every morning, go out for a walk, wave to everyone, roll around, watch them cheer for me, then get off work and go to sleep. Repeat. Until that day, something was different. Lanzi didn't come to visit all day, and no one opened the door for me to go out and work. But today, I felt full of energy, and my strength was much greater. I thought I had grown up. I really wanted to wait for Lanzi to show it off to her. But from that day on, I never saw Lanzi again, nor did I see the sun. Someone hurriedly gave me some bamboo and left. I really wanted to ask that person what was happening, but I couldn't communicate with humans. No one told me what was going on. From then on, things started to unfold in unimaginable ways. Other giant pandas escaped their cages or broke down the doors, crawling out of their initial enclosures. I tried too, but I was still too weak and didn't succeed. Until one day, I finally smashed my cage and got out. Most of the giant pandas in the area escaped their cages and ran outside. Extremely hungry and thirsty, we ran out and first ate all the bamboo we could find. After that, the other giant pandas started hunting humans. That day I saw Lanzi. She and a few others were surrounded by a group of giant pandas. I wanted to protect Lanzi, but I was too weak. I was almost killed by another giant panda. Luckily, my mom appeared and saved me. But Lanzi died. I was very sad. For days after that, I was always unhappy. My mom killed many of the bullies who picked on us, and some other animals too. I started to like eating meat, except human meat. For some reason, one day, after eating a lion, I suddenly felt incredibly sleepy. When I woke up, I realized the whole world was different. I could see things very far away. No, more accurately, those images appeared directly in my head. I saw many wild beasts hunting humans, and humans killing them too. I didn't want to eat humans. I just wanted to eat bamboo, fruits, steamed buns, drink milk, and add some honey. I still wanted to pretend to be innocent in front of humans, hear them praise me, see them smile. Then, every day, I just needed to bask in the sun, show my face, and I'd have food and a clean enclosure. So, I left my mom and went up to a human child. I wanted to talk to him, but the boy cried and ran away when he saw me. After that, many adults appeared and attacked me. They showed disgust and fear, no longer the joy they used to have. Why is this happening? Why don't they like me? I don't like this. I knew it. For everyone to love us again, and for the other giant pandas to stop hunting humans, I wanted to become the Panda King. I emitted a thought that could control other beasts, making them obey me. And very quickly, I became the Panda King. But I realized that still wasn't enough. Other beasts were still attacking humans, and humans were still afraid of us. So, I ordered the giant pandas I controlled to go kill other beasts to balance them out. Eventually, I became the ruler of all the beasts in this area. However, when these beasts obeyed me, I realized that if I didn't let them hunt humans, they would starve to death, or they would kill each other. As for humans, even though I didn't allow my subordinates to attack them, they would still go out and find stray beasts to kill. I suddenly understood. This was the changing of the times. Survival of the fittest. The strong prey on the weak. That was the current way of survival. So, I lifted the restrictions on my subordinates. After that, for a long time, there was no sign of humans in this area. Until today, I saw a human again. I want to catch him. Finding a place, Lin Shi let the Demon King swallow the Tier 5 leopard. As expected, right after eating it, the Demon King immediately began to evolve. Lin Shi stored the Demon King in his spatial storage, closely observing its transformation. This was the first time he had witnessed the evolution process from Tier 5 to Tier 6. The Demon King fell into a deep sleep, but the aura around its body constantly fluctuated. The other origin beasts in the spatial storage all retreated to the edges, acting extremely cautious, not even daring to breathe loudly. This state lasted for a whole week. During this process, all of the Demon King's fur fell out, and then a new coat grew in. The new fur was snow white, replacing the old black, white, and gray coat. The old fur was soft, but now each strand was as stiff as a boar's bristle. Its already large paws grew even larger, with distinct joints. The force of its four limbs hitting the ground was stronger. Its body shape didn't change, still maintaining the form of a normal Tier 5 wolf. When the evolution process was complete, the Demon King opened its eyes. Two flashes of light gleamed in its eyes. Its eyes, which were originally just strangely expressive, now looked even more distinct than before. After this transformation, the Demon King no longer looked like a dog. It looked like a ferocious beast waiting to hunt. Lin Shi released the newly evolved Demon King from the spatial storage. Touching its rather stiff fur, he thought about considering using a snowboard instead of walking in the future. During those few days, the clouded leopard also ate a lot of origin beast meat and evolved to Tier 5. The clouded leopard's evolution time was much shorter than the Demon King's, taking only 1 day to complete. Now, its speed could rival the Demon King's before its evolution. This was good news for Lin Shi. Along with the long-armed ape, he now had 2 Tier 5 origin beasts. The others, like Tyrant and Xiaobai, were also nearing the threshold of evolution. Right now, what Lin Shi wanted to know most was whether the Tier 6 Demon King had gained any new abilities. Were Tier 6 abilities exclusive to humans, or could origin beasts possess them too? Very quickly, the Demon King gave Lin Shi the answer. In the air, over a dozen sharp icicles condensed, shooting straight toward the wall of a ruined office building in the distance. Icicles. Lin Shi's pupils contracted as he saw the Demon King's eyes emit a faint blue light. This was the first time he had seen an ability that could condense into physical objects. Lin Shi only felt the temperature around the Demon King drop slightly, and then the icicles suddenly appeared. It was completely different from movie effects. This visual effect happening right before his eyes was incredibly astonishing. With a loud boom, snow and dust flew everywhere. The office wall was pierced with 10 large holes, seemingly penetrating straight through the thick wall. The office building, already dilapidated, tilted even more and collapsed with a rumble in their direction. Lin Shi and the Demon King quickly dodged. From the lines the Demon King drew in the snow, Lin Shi learned that the Demon King could control the icicles it created, but couldn't control anything else. These icicles were condensed from the origin power within its body. With its current origin power reserves, the Demon King could create a maximum of over 100 icicles, or 1 massive icicle. These icicles had terrifying destructive power. Unlike fragile blocks of ice, they were like 1,000-year-old ice, as sharp as origin power blades. The Demon King's speed was also twice as fast as before. Its physical quality and defense had increased significantly. Origin beasts below Tier 4 couldn't even break its defense. Very good. Lin Shi smiled in satisfaction. With the Demon King's help, the chances of successfully dealing with the origin beast invasion in Sichuan province had increased significantly. A few days later, after waiting for the Demon King to get used to its new body and abilities, Lin Shi began his preparations. He made a careful plan and set out with his origin beast army. The first step, reduce the number of enemy origin beasts. During his free days, Lin Shi used his snowboard to travel all over the city. Based on an old map, he sketched a rough map of Sichuan province, marking the areas with high concentrations of origin beasts. From that, he estimated their main headquarters, the giant panda base. The closer to the base, the denser the origin beasts. If he wasn't mistaken, the Beast King was there. Lin Shi guessed that the Tier 6 origin beast used to be a resident of the base. Over the past few days of interaction, Lin Shi learned that the giant panda named Xiao Siyuan was Tyrant's mother. Xiao Siyuan's injuries had completely healed. Therefore, over the past few days, Lin Shi took Tyrant and Xiao Siyuan out. Since they were both giant pandas, Xiao Siyuan and Tyrant had definitely lived at this base. Lin Shi tried asking Xiao Siyuan to lead the way, but those origin beasts, upon seeing Lin Shi, ignored Xiao Siyuan and Tyrant and attacked him directly. Lin Shi changed directions multiple times, but still failed. Approaching alone didn't work either. He was always discovered and then chased by a pack of origin beasts. Even applying scent-masking potions was ineffective. He had to give up on that idea. Letting Tyrant and Xiao Siyuan lead the way was too risky. If they were discovered, he would lose a high-tier combat asset. It was better to wipe out all these origin beasts and accumulate experience points to level up his army. On the roof of an abandoned dormitory, Lin Shi looked at his hand-drawn rough map and put it away. Down below, the Demon King was leading the origin beast army in a battle against a pack of origin beasts. He took out his well-maintained giant crossbow from his spatial storage, loaded a spiral steel bolt, aimed, and fired. The Demon King's army was invincible, and Lin Shi's spiral steel bolts always hit their targets at crucial moments. As long as the Beast King didn't show up, with their overwhelming advantage, wiping out a few dozen origin beasts took less than 10 minutes. If the Beast King appeared, the Demon King would follow Lin Shi's plan and lead the army to break out of the encirclement. With this tactic, after 3 attacks, they had killed over 200 origin beasts. But that was still only a tenth of the total number of origin beasts in Sichuan province. Fortunately, Lin Shi wasn't short on time. However, after the 3rd attack, the Beast King seemed to have figured out Lin Shi's intentions. The next day, when Lin Shi led his army out to hunt, he found that the number of origin beasts around the giant panda base was much denser than before. They were no longer scattered. In this situation, if the Demon King led the army to attack, they would immediately be surrounded. Lin Shi placed even more importance on the Beast King, but would that stop him? The answer was no. This time, Lin Shi and the Demon King charged into the Beast Pack alone, unleashing Metal Storm. The Demon King condensed dozens of icicles. Lin Shi and his dog plunged into the Beast Pack, killing over 100 beasts in the blink of an eye. Then, before the Beast Pack could react, he quickly collected the beast corpses at another location, then casually rode the Demon King away. Doing this twice, when the Demon King's origin power was depleted, Lin Shi switched to using Metal Storm. Each time, he could also kill 20 to 30 beasts. Lin Shi guessed that this tactic would soon draw out the Beast King. They couldn't win in a fight, and they couldn't catch up in a chase. Unless the Beast King showed up personally, there was absolutely no way to stop him and the Demon King. It could only wait as Lin Shi gradually devoured the Beast Pack. That day, the harvest was incredibly rich. 1 man and 1 dog had killed over 300 origin beasts, causing the number of beasts in the province to drop sharply. He thought that on the 3rd day, the Beast King would personally appear to confront him. But unexpectedly, when Lin Shi led his origin beast army out on the 3rd day, the Beast Pack had vanished. The Beast King, Hualan, indeed found Lin Shi and the Demon King very difficult to deal with. So, the previous afternoon, it had thought long and hard about the direction the Beast Pack should take. Finally, it chose the direction of the setting sun, heading toward what it thought was a warmer place. The sun symbolized warmth. It definitely couldn't be wrong. A head-on confrontation was impossible. Even though it was a Tier 6 beast, it couldn't even beat a Tier 5 beast in a fight. Its ability was only to control other beasts. Therefore, on the 3rd day, when Lin Shi once again led his origin beast army, ready to battle that smart Beast King, they had already fled. Lin Shi stepped into the giant panda base, only to see the ground covered in animal feces and not a single beast in sight. He was stunned. He had never seen a Beast King leading so many beasts be this terrified. He stood there, dumbfounded, unsure whether to pursue or not. Fortunately, the problem was quickly resolved. Following the tracks, Lin Shi discovered the Beast Pack was running west. That was exactly the direction of Tibet Province, his next destination. This time, there was no need to choose. Lin Shi stepped onto his snowboard and set off alone, heading west. The Beast Pack wasn't moving fast, as most were Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 beasts, along with many cubs. It only took Lin Shi 2 hours to catch up to the rear of the pack. This Beast Pack had thousands of members, but only a Tier 4 giant panda was leading them. There was no sign of the Tier 6 Beast King. Lin Shi guessed the Beast King had run ahead. This further proved that the smart Beast King knew the low-tier beasts moved slowly, so it had cut its losses and abandoned them. Lin Shi's appearance caused the Beast Pack to panic. The Tier 4 giant panda seemed to have received some sort of order. When it spotted Lin Shi, it let out a roar, abandoned the pack, and ran away, leaving behind a herd of wide-eyed, low-tier origin beasts. Immediately after, these beasts grabbed their mates and cubs and scattered in all directions. This time, it was Lin Shi's turn to stare in disbelief. What kind of tactic was this? Ever since encountering the Beast King in Sichuan province, Lin Shi had constantly faced unexpected situations. In the end, he didn't chase after the over 1,000 low-tier origin beasts, but instead followed the fleeing Tier 4 giant panda. He had already collected several hundred low-tier origin beast corpses in his spatial storage. Plus, with these beasts scattering, Chasing them down one by one would take too much time and energy. Lin Shi didn't want to use his origin beast army to chase them right now. His ultimate goal was the Beast King. Lin Shi realized the Beast King must be a giant panda. As long as he followed this Tier 4 giant panda, he would definitely find the Beast King. Lin Shi followed the Tier 4 giant panda for several hours, but still didn't catch up to the Beast King's pack. He suddenly realized that this giant panda might have been abandoned by the Beast King. It probably didn't even know the Beast King's location. Lin Shi sighed inwardly. He had been played by an animal. A giant panda, no less, and one that used the 36 stratagems so proficiently. The Tier 4 giant panda ran while panicking and crying out, "Why does this guy keep chasing me? This isn't what the boss said. Oh no, I think I went the wrong way. I clearly followed the fireball in the sky. So why can't I find the boss? Boss, save me." Lin Shi knocked the giant panda out and stored it in his spatial storage, leaving it for the Demon King and the others to teach it a lesson. After that, he returned to the location where the Beast Pack had scattered earlier to look for tracks of the Beast King's pack. But because over 1,000 origin beasts had run amok, the tracks were destroyed. Plus, several hours had passed, and the thick snow had almost completely erased the old tracks. He sighed, feeling a bit regretful. Besides the bizarre tree and the Demon King, he had never met such a smart origin beast. It was a pity he let it escape this time. Lin Shi took the rabbit mouse out of his spatial storage and put it in his hood pocket. "If you spot anything on the way, let me know." Ever since he discovered the rabbit mouse's ability to find herbs, it had become a top general in his mutated plant search team. Moreover, the rabbit mouse was tiny, the smallest origin beast Lin Shi currently had, making it very convenient to carry around. After giving his instructions, Lin Shi stepped onto his snowboard, using his familiar object control ability to continue heading west. Since he didn't know where the Beast King had run off to, he could only switch to another target, heading to Tibet province to find mutated plants. Lin Shi didn't know that Hualan had maintained its original course, deciding to head west and continuously leading the beast pack westward. It hadn't abandoned its kind. That Tier 4 giant panda thought Hualan's order was to follow the sun. But the sun's direction in the morning and afternoon was different, which was why it led Lin Shi astray. Now that Lin Shi was heading west again, the distance between him and Hualan was closing. Tibet province, Dongga City. The once vast grasslands were now covered in white snow. The low houses from before had been buried under the thick snow. They were no longer visible. On the vast snowy land, there were now dense clusters of igloos huddled together. From a distance, they looked like snow mounds hugging each other for warmth in the endless snow. At this time, the morning sun had just risen. Although it was much later than last year, the people here still kept the habit of working according to the sunrise. Someone shook off their thick fur coat, stepped out of an igloo, grabbed a handful of snow from the ground to rub their face, and then walked toward the igloo at the edge of the cluster. This edge igloo was a temporary toilet. Before, they used to walk a bit further to relieve themselves in the morning, but not anymore. Now, they absolutely had to do it indoors, or their equipment might freeze. After relieving themselves, many people came out of their igloos holding iron shovels or other tools, and began clearing the snow that had accumulated around the igloos overnight. Last night's snow wasn't heavy. It took about 2 hours to clear the area around the igloos and the camp. If they encountered heavy snow or a blizzard, they would have to build new igloos. That was much faster than digging the old ones out of the snow. Before the extreme cold began, this place had over 1,000 survivors. But after that terrifying winter, the number of igloos had dropped by more than half. After clearing the snow, everyone returned to their homes to enjoy their precious food with their wives, children, and siblings. It was mostly fresh beef and mutton, marinated with spices, though some were unmarinated. Before the extreme cold, Dongga had many cattle and sheep herders. When the extreme cold hit, the mayor of Dongga ordered the slaughter of the cattle and sheep for storage. Thanks to this beef and mutton, they had survived until now. Along the way, many people died from illnesses caused by eating bad raw meat or froze to death due to the sudden drop in temperature. The food of the dead became a gift for the survivors. The survivors, after a year, had gotten used to eating raw meat. Together, they savored those precious pieces of meat. Because they had gone through a winter, the meat was running out. From spring until now, the The temperature in Donga had stayed above -80 degrees. Summer was approaching. The survivors in the igloos were sharpening their knives, preparing for a collective origin beast hunt. Preparing for the coming winter, they would take up their knives and slaughter the origin beasts that wanted to eat them, as well as anyone else who wanted to eat them. A young man wrapped in thick fur rushed into the largest igloo in the center of the cluster. The Asen people are here again asking for food. Inside the igloo, a burly, tall, middle-aged man with a full beard, Tahalaji, glared. They came last month. They said they'd wait until summer to come back. This man was the former mayor of Donga and the current camp leader, Tahalaji. Damn it. Those Asen bastards don't keep their word. Let's fight them to the death. Tahalaji's son was furious, clearly unable to take it anymore. Ever since the extreme cold suddenly struck, the border guards in Tibet lost contact, lost their food supply, and received no help. Add to that the threat of origin beasts. In order to protect the people of Tibet, most of the soldiers froze to death or died in battle. Then, very quickly, refugees from chaotic countries trampled over the corpses of others and flooded into Tibet, especially the refugees from the heavily populated Asen country. They first flooded into the neighboring countries of Nepal and Bhutan bordering Xia country, then marched straight into Tibet. Due to the lack of food, over the past few months, the Asen people had poured into Tibet, gathered together, and formed groups. They threatened and plundered the survivor bases in the cities of Tibet. Tibet was desolate. After the apocalypse, the population dropped by more than half, making it even more sparsely populated. Many survivor bases had to hand over food to survive, their land occupied by enemies. This was something no native could endure. Tahalaji frowned and lowered his head. He also wanted to fight to the death with the Asen invaders occupying his homeland, but the enemy was too numerous. Without reinforcements, fighting was hard, and not fighting was hard too. The tragedy of the massacre in West Sichuan City was a bloody lesson for them. The Asen were incredibly brutal. Not only did they kill people, but they also hoarded corpses as food reserves. Tahalaji had heard news that the government army was coming from Sha City. Half a month ago, he and two other base leaders had discussed it and sent a team to Sha City to ask for help. Right now, reinforcements hadn't arrived, so they temporarily couldn't clash with these Asen. Let's go take a look, Tahalaji said in a deep voice. Stepping outside, Tahalaji saw the dark-skinned Asen crowd from a distance. This group had over 100 people, but it wasn't their entire force. Since crossing the border, the Asen had established a stronghold in Daocheng, right next to Donga City. That place gathered tens of thousands of Asen. Tahalaji's entire camp currently had just over 2,000 people, a third of whom were elderly and children. They didn't have the strength to resist the Asen. Those Asen, holding crude homemade weapons, had fierce and greedy eyes, scanning every igloo. The men in the other igloos heard the commotion and ran out. They automatically followed behind Tahalaji, confronting the Asen to create an imposing presence. Li Shujia. We already paid tribute last month. Among the Asen was a man wearing a blue cotton coat. He was a local, named Li Shujia. He used to be a top student and knew a little Asen language. Since the Asen invasion, Li Shujia and his family had submitted to them, acting as an interpreter, helping these Asen extort food from the remaining settlements. This camp has already paid twice. They thought the Asen would come to collect taxes in 2 months. Now they suddenly appeared demanding more. If they paid, many people in the camp would starve to death this month. Last month was last month. The rules have changed now. You have to pay once a month. If you don't have food, pay with people. Li Shujia stood next to a fierce-looking Asen, relaying his words to Tahalaji. Actually, Li Shujia had heard that a VIP had arrived at the Asen base and needed a lot of food for a reception, which was why they changed it from once every 3 months to once a month. But what did that have to do with him? Looking at these people, pale and emaciated from hunger, Li Shujia sighed at his own foresight. You're going too far. You want our people? Let's capture these guys first. A survivor behind Tahalaji shouted angrily. The others immediately surrounded the Asen. The Asen grew vigilant, angrily muttering something incomprehensible to Li Shujia. Li Shujia panicked a bit, but tried to act tough. This time we can reduce it. Just pay half. If you act rashly, this base will be leveled tomorrow. Your wives, children, and the elderly will all die. You should understand that. Tahalaji gritted his teeth, signaling everyone to calm down. This is the last time. Before summer comes, if you come again, we'll fight you to the death. We'll live and die together. Li Shujia sighed. No problem. Tahalaji frowned, returning to his igloo to inform everyone they had to hand over a portion of their food. After reluctantly gathering enough and handing it over to the Asen, they finally smirked, put on a show of arrogance, and left triumphantly. Tahalaji's son said anxiously, Dad, at this rate, we only have enough food for less than half a month. Tahalaji made the difficult decision to start the hunting plan earlier than expected. Starting tomorrow, gather the strong young men to go hunting with me. Li Shujia and the group of Asen returned to their gathering point and entered an igloo with a small flag planted on the roof. Inside, a one-eyed Asen was humbly entertaining someone, his back turned to Li Shujia. Even though he was the base leader, he wasn't sitting in the center seat. The person sitting in the center was a man from Xia country. Li Shujia quietly approached the igloo, stood beside the one-eyed Asen, and spoke softly, with a hint of a local accent. Leader, the tribute from Donga City has been fully collected. The one-eyed Asen glanced at Li Shujia with satisfaction, then told him to wait aside as an interpreter. On his face, the one-eyed Asen showed clear flattery and humility. Looking at Li Dihai sitting in the center, he said, My lord, we will fully cooperate in finding the cordyceps you need. During this time, please let us serve you well. If we find that cordyceps, you will fulfill your promise to speed up the medicine evolution process, right? Li Dihai, a middle-aged man with a sinister face and no eyebrows, was a member of another hidden family, the Li family. For decades, the Li family had been developing strongly in the Middle East, planning to use it as a springboard after the apocalypse arrived. This time, Li Dihai brought 4 clan members back to the country for a cordyceps that was about to evolve to Tier 2. It had been noticed before the apocalypse. Li Dihai said cheerfully, Don't worry. As long as you find a surviving mutated herb, whether it's cordyceps or not, I will reward you handsomely. That cordyceps had originally been targeted by the Li family before the apocalypse. At that time, the cordyceps was accidentally discovered by an herb gatherer as a Tier 1 mutated plant. Origin power on Earth was incredibly scarce, and the source of Tier 1 mutated plants was almost exceedingly rare. Calling it a national treasure wouldn't be an exaggeration. After being discovered by a domestic branch of the Li family, it was immediately transported by private jet to the Li family patriarch. The patriarch verified that the Tier 1 cordyceps was about to evolve to Tier 2, and immediately ordered it to be replanted in its original location. He also sent several Tier 2 experts from the family to guard the mutated plant. This matter was overseen by Li Dihai. The source of a Tier 2 mutated herb was tied to whether the nearly 70-year-old Li family patriarch could suddenly unlock the Tier 6 gene lock. Its value was 100 times, even more, than that of a Tier 1 mutated plant. But after the apocalypse arrived, those guards lost contact. Li Dihai was ordered this time to find and bring back that cordyceps. 3 days ago, he arrived at the marked location, dug 3 feet deep, but still found no trace of the cordyceps. The guards had also disappeared. This made Li Dihai extremely angry. However, the mountain where the mutated plant was discovered originally had many herbs, including cordyceps. Now that the apocalypse had arrived, most of the herbs were frozen, but the surviving ones were definitely mutated plants. He needed to find a living cordyceps to hand over. It didn't necessarily have to be the original one. Therefore, Li Dihai came here, using origin pills as bargaining chips with the most populated base in Tibet. Looking at the greedy Asen in front of him, a hint of mockery and murderous intent flashed in Li Dihai's eyes, but he quickly hid it well. However, you don't have enough people. Find a way to summon the local natives here to dig together. Tomorrow, I will trigger an avalanche to help reduce your workload, Li Dihai said. He took a small bottle from his pocket and poured out a white pill, identical to the origin pill Lin Shur had received from the Qi family before. This is your deposit. Before the apocalypse, cordyceps mainly grew on plateaus over 3,000 meters high. Now covered by thick snow, digging through the snow to find the herb required a lot of manpower and time. But Li Dihai couldn't wait that long. His first plan was to trigger an avalanche, then go up the mountain to dig. That way, there would be less snow on the mountain, and the digging progress would be faster. As for how massive the power and scope of an avalanche on the world's highest plateau would be, and how many survivors at the foot of the mountain and around the plateau would die, Li Dihai didn't care. Blind Asen received the origin pill and immediately swallowed it. Feeling the medicine's effect, he nodded repeatedly. To him, becoming stronger was the most important thing. The life or death of others, even his subordinates, meant nothing to him. Li Shujia, standing beside him, anxiously translated for the Asen, his heart turning cold. If he wasn't mistaken, several survivor bases, including Donga City, were located at the foot of the plateau where Li Dihai planned to trigger the avalanche. Lin Shi, his hair graying, rode his snowboard, holding a map and observing his surroundings. The howling cold morning wind blew Lin Shi's coat. If he hadn't miscalculated, he had already entered Tibet province. Mist covered his head. From Sichuan province to here, he had been snowboarding at high speed for 2 days and 2 nights. Despite the long journey, Lin Shi remained alert. With his current spiritual power of over 5,000 points, as long as he didn't use it for attacking, he could normally stay awake for 7 days without feeling tired. Along the way, he continuously used his object control ability to steer the snowboard. He had become much more proficient at it, and his speed had increased significantly. At this moment, the rabbit mouse in the hood pocket on his back stirred. Smell something? Lin Shi took the rabbit mouse out of his hood. After days of communication, the rabbit mouse could understand a bit of what Lin Shi said. It sniffed the air and raised a tiny paw, pointing in a direction. Lin Shi was delighted and immediately steered the snowboard in that direction. Meanwhile, in Donga City, Tahalaji was preparing to go hunting when he suddenly received news from Li Shujia, who had run over to report. What did you say? Someone wants to trigger an avalanche. Tahalaji looked at Li Shujia in disbelief, veins popping on his forehead, clearly furious. He was about to grab Li Shujia to demand answers, but was stopped by 2 Asen subordinates. What are you trying to do? I can't tell you the reason, and I can't decide this matter. For the sake of our compatriots, I came to warn you. Whether you listen or not is up to you. I advise you, if you still want these people to live, abandon your belongings and run quickly, Li Shujia said coldly, then turned and quickly left. Actually, Blind Asen had sent Li Shujia to warn the survivors at the foot of the mountain early in the morning because he still needed them to go up to the 3,000-meter altitude to dig for herbs later. If they all died, there would be a massive shortage of manpower. Tahalaji was trembling with anger, but could only watch Li Shujia leave. He didn't dare doubt the truth of it, and hurriedly informed everyone in the camp to pack light and prepare to leave. Losing so many supplies and having to leave this place, who knew how many people would survive tonight? They had to quickly find a new place to stay and build igloos. Following the rabbit mouse's guidance, Lin Shi went up a mountain. As expected of the world's highest plateau, he had only reached halfway up the mountain, and the temperature had already dropped to at least -100 degrees Celsius. The rabbit mouse, hiding in Lin Shi's hood, couldn't help but shiver. Although Lin Shi's body wasn't afraid of the cold, his eyebrows and hair were quickly covered in a layer of white frost. Combined with his white clothes, from a distance, he looked like a giant snowman. Lin Shi didn't mind. He tucked the rabbit mouse into his coat to let it guide him. Very quickly, the location was pinpointed. Right under here? Lin Shi pointed down and asked. The rabbit mouse nodded cutely. Lin Shi used his spiritual power to search below, piercing through the over 20-meter thick snow, and found a cordyceps buried several meters deep in the soil. Looking at it, it was only slightly larger than pre-apocalypse cordyceps. It was probably a low-tier one, but something was better than nothing. Plus, Lin Shi had the ability to promote plant growth, which could help it evolve. Because this cordyceps was quite small and not buried too deep, Lin Shi didn't ask the long-armed ape to dig. He dug it up himself with a shovel. On this snowy mountain, if the long-armed ape wasn't careful and used too much force, causing an avalanche, it wouldn't be good. On his way up the mountain, he had used his spiritual power and saw quite a few survivors at the foot of the mountain. Thinking of this, Lin Shi dug even more carefully. During the digging process, his spiritual power constantly covered a 2-kilometer radius around him. Observing the wind and snow, Tibet had low temperatures, so after entering Tibet, Lin Shi encountered few origin beasts. But whenever he did, they were at least tier 2 or higher. Not long after, Lin Shi suddenly noticed someone sneaking up the opposite mountain. At first, he didn't pay attention and continued digging carefully. Until he dug up the cordyceps, that person was still climbing the mountain, seemingly aiming for the peak. In this environment, for someone to have the free time to climb a snowy mountain, there must be something fishy going on. Lin Shi filled the snow hole back up and quietly observed the person. Li Yuan braved the danger, looking toward the peak of the snowy mountain, his steps steady as he advanced upward. He was 50 years old, having spent 50 years as a tier 2 cultivator. In this apocalyptic era, most descendants of the families were leveling up quickly. For someone like Li Yuan, his value in the Li family was constantly declining. However, he still had 2 sons in the family. Li Dihai had promised him that as long as he completed this mission, whether he lived or died, his 2 sons would each get a chance to meditate under the guidance of an elder. Meditation was a privilege reserved only for direct descendants at a certain age. Being guided by an elder, for a lineage like theirs, which was basically like servants to the Li family, only those with extremely high contributions could learn the meditation method. But without a guide, getting started was as hard as finding a needle in a haystack. As long as they unlocked meditation, his lineage would directly enter the ranks of the main branch. This was a class upgrade. Without meditation to enhance their spiritual power, they would never reach tier 4, or even tier 3, in their entire lives. Therefore, to give his 2 sons this opportunity, Li Yuan decided to risk his life. As for whether the tens of thousands of people at the foot of the mountain would survive the avalanche, that was no longer within his consideration. Li Yuan climbed near the peak, feeling the altitude difference wasn't much. He took a megaphone out of his backpack, looked out at the vast white world, took a deep breath, and prepared to shout to trigger the avalanche. Just as he took a deep breath, instantly, the sound of something tearing through the wind rushed at him from the right. An ambush. Li Yuan was startled. A sharp pain hit his head. In an instant, his consciousness sank into darkness, and he fell backward into the snow. Before he died, Li Yuan didn't even have time to react. On this mountain thousands of meters high, why would someone ambush him? He couldn't have expected that the fatal blow didn't come from this mountain, but from another mountain nearly 2,000 meters away. Seeing the spiral steel bolt hit its target, Lin Shi lowered his giant crossbow. Good thing I kept an eye on this old guy, otherwise an avalanche would have been a huge pain. The altitude here was so high, and the snow accumulation was massive. If an avalanche occurred, being hit head-on by tens or hundreds of tons of snow, even he could die. Moreover, an avalanche on one mountain could easily trigger a chain reaction, pulling in the surrounding peaks. The scale of the avalanche then would be unimaginably huge. By then, no one at the foot of the mountain would survive. This guy bringing a megaphone up the mountain to shout and cause an avalanche was truly malicious. He knew there would be many crazy people after the apocalypse, even some who wanted to destroy the world or drag others down with them. He didn't expect to meet one today who wanted to use a shout to trigger an avalanche. Triggering an avalanche in a place like this, other than someone with an antisocial personality who wanted to harm others and themselves, Lin Shi couldn't think of any other reason. Lin Shi stored the crossbow in his spatial storage, hiding all traces. Alright, let's continue finding mutated herbs. Lin Shi used a small clump of dirt to store the cordyceps in his spatial storage, then handed a leftover piece of ginseng root to the rabbit mouse waiting quietly in his hood pocket. The rabbit mouse's small eyes lit up. It quickly took the ginseng root, squeaked a few times, nibbled on it, and then pointed in another direction. At the foot of the mountain, Li Dihai waited for over half a day, but still didn't hear the sound of an avalanche. His frown deepened. The sound of an avalanche should be very loud. Even from this distance, he should have heard it. Why is there still no movement? Li Dihai frowned and said to the person standing behind him, "Go ask what's going on. Why hasn't it started yet? If he's scared, tell him that if he doesn't complete it, I'll kick his 2 sons out of the family when we get back." This threat was a death sentence for Li Yuan. The people of the Li family all carried short-range communication devices. Hearing this, the subordinate behind Li Dihai stepped out of the igloo to contact Li Yuan. Unsurprisingly, he couldn't reach him. "Elder Hai, I can't reach Li Yuan. He's unreachable." Li Dihai suspected Li Yuan might have gotten scared and run away. The time he could delay was unpredictable. He pointed at the subordinate and said, "You go up the mountain to find him. If you can't find him, you complete the mission in his place." Li Dihai's subordinate was so scared his legs trembled. As expected of the Tibetan plateau, there were so many mutated herbs here. Lin Shi and the rabbit mouse searched everywhere and found a total of 3 types of herbs. Besides the cordyceps, there were 2 types Lin Shi didn't recognize, but the rabbit mouse confirmed they weren't poisonous. Lin Shi was thrilled. Even though these mutated herbs weren't high tier, the sheer quantity made up for it. As for why he didn't let the long-armed ape help search, it was because when Lin Shi used his spiritual power to scan the snowy mountains, he found that due to the short accumulation time, the snow layer was quite loose. Plus, the layer was thick. The snow and the ground were maintaining a fragile balance. This situation could easily be disrupted by a small impact, causing an avalanche. Therefore, during the digging process, he was very careful. Perhaps most of the herbs on the Tibetan plateau preferred cold environments before the apocalypse. Because of this, Lin Shi found that the number of mutated plants here might exceed his imagination. "There's some on this mountain too?" Lin Shi pointed at the snowy mountain in front of him. The rabbit mouse obediently nodded. It understood clearly. Following this person meant having food to eat. Lin Shi smiled, preparing to go up the mountain, when he was suddenly startled. Someone was climbing the mountain where he had just shot that crazy guy. Moreover, scanning with his spiritual power. The person about to climb the mountain was dressed very similarly to the guy he had just shot. The 2 of them must be from the same place. 2 people going up the mountain back to back for unknown reasons. Lin Shi frowned, suddenly feeling this wasn't as simple as he thought. Putting the rabbit mouse into his hood pocket, Lin Shi adjusted his snowboard, defying gravity, and automatically moved upward. This time, he didn't use his crossbow to shoot this person, but followed him up the mountain. Li Jin, wearing an anxious and tense expression, climbed the mountain. Suddenly, he felt a chill down his spine. Immediately, a sharp pain hit the back of his neck, and he passed out. A Tier 2 cultivator was as easy to deal with as flipping a hand. Lin Shi quietly approached, dragged the unconscious man down to the foot of the mountain to a spot sheltered from the wind, and smashed a handful of snow into his face to wake him up quickly. He had to ask why these people kept going up the mountain. Li Jin woke up in piercing pain, hurriedly sat up, and reflexively reached for his waist. But unfortunately, he felt nothing. This only made Li Jin hesitate for a moment before immediately launching an unarmed attack at Lin Shi. These descendants of the hidden families were trained in combat, assassination, and skills to protect the main branch from a young age. Li Jin was no exception. Realizing he was ambushed, he immediately reacted with a lethal move. If he had encountered an ordinary cultivator of the same tier, even with a weapon, they might not have been Li Jin's match. However, Li Jin ran into Lin Shi. Lin Shi raised a hand to block an elbow strike, then countered with a straight punch to Li Jin's stomach. This punch was just enough to incapacitate Li Jin without killing him. Li Jin spat blood, clutching his stomach in agony as he collapsed to the ground. "Who are you? Who are you?" the 2 asked almost simultaneously. Li Jin wanted to know why there was another expert besides them in this remote place. And Lin Shi naturally wanted to know who this person was, what his connection was to the guy who tried to cause the avalanche, and what his purpose was. From the opponent's moves, Lin Shi realized this wasn't an ordinary Tier 2 cultivator. He likely had a significant background. Therefore, Lin Shi didn't beat around the bush. He placed a foot on Li Jin's ankle. "If I apply a little more force, your leg will be crippled instantly. Now, I ask you answer. Understand." Lin Shi's voice was very calm, as if making everyday conversation. But that tone, combined with Lin Shi's actions and overwhelming strength, terrified Li Jin even more. Especially Lin Shi's face. He was too young. "Ask." Li Jin swallowed hard. "Who are you? What are you doing up the mountain?" Lin Shi's first question made Li Jin's eyes dart around. He opened his mouth, trying to find a way to evade. "My family needs medicine. I went up the mountain to try my luck, to see if I could find any herbs." "Liar." Lin Shi narrowed his eyes and pressed his foot down slightly. Li Jin's ankle was instantly crushed. Li Jin was about to scream in agony, but Lin Shi's cold voice made him swallow the scream back down. "If you scream, I'll make you swallow all your teeth. Lin Shi looked at the middle-aged man who was biting his lip hard. Before Li Jin could dodge, Lin Shi stepped on his other leg. Now, can you answer me? Lin Shi knew very well how to torture people, especially those afraid of death. He quickly learned Li Jin's name, identity, and their purpose for coming to Tibet. One of the 4 great hidden families, the Li family. They came to find mutated plants, so they wanted to use an avalanche to clear the snow on the mountain. Lin Shi used the information he gathered to question Li Jin again, but Li Jin couldn't answer any more questions. The pristine white snow was now stained red, and Li Jin was completely unrecognizable. His 4 limbs were twisted and broken, his nose filled with snow and gravel, dying in agony. Lin Shi stored the corpse in his spatial storage, then took out his map to check the location of Jiqing. It wasn't because the people at the foot of the mountain were about to lose their homes or be driven up the mountain by Li Dihai to die. It was because if he didn't kill Li Dihai when he was digging for mutated herbs, Li Dihai might send someone up the mountain to trigger an avalanche again. That was truly unpredictable. Thinking of this, the snowboard appeared under his feet. Pinpointing the location, the snowboard glided away, carrying Lin Shi swiftly toward Jiqing. Lin Shi headed straight for Jiqing, where Li Jin's group was stationed. The Asin were active all over the city, so the base was easy to find. In just a breath's time, Lin Shi used his spiritual power to locate it. At the same time, he also discovered that Li Dihai was inside the Asin base. When Lin Shi appeared on his snowboard, a few Asin active outside spotted him. They immediately roared and blocked his path with knives. Their ferocious expressions clearly meant no good. A flash of metallic cold light gleamed. The Asin's throats were half severed, and they fell, spraying fresh blood. Lin Shi barely broke his stride, gliding past the corpses. These people weren't even worth storing in his spatial storage. Toward these Asin plundering and killing on Xia country soil, Lin Shi had absolutely no pity. Inside an igloo, several Asin were raping women they had abducted from the city. The women struggled in despair, but to no avail. They knew they couldn't escape this nightmare today. Their husbands and children had already been murdered by the Asin. Hatred surged in their hearts. Suddenly, several metal shards flew into the igloo from outside. Each shard accurately pierced the back of an Asin's head, exiting through their forehead. The women didn't even have time to see the metal shards. They only saw all the Asin drop dead. At this moment, the women thought they had met a god. They knelt on the ground, bowing in one direction. They didn't know that similar scenes were playing out in every igloo across the base. After using his spiritual power to scan the entire Asin gathering, the coldness in Lin Shi's eyes didn't diminish in the slightest. He controlled the origin power shards, reaping the lives of the Asin. Lin Shi killed without any concealment. Quickly, blind Asin received the report. Hearing that a Xia country man had broken in and was using bizarre methods to kill people, blind Asin immediately dragged the interpreter, Li Shujia, to Li Dihai's igloo. "My lord, this is bad." Li Dihai frowned at blind Asin. He had been waiting here for the avalanche until he was bored out of his mind, and his voice was very irritated. "What's bad? Is there? Someone is slaughtering their way in." Li Dihai was an elder of the Li family, a Tier 4 evolver. A Tier 3 evolver reaching 300 spiritual power points could advance to Tier 4, while the peak of Tier 4 was only 1,000 points. Li Dihai only had over 400 spiritual power points, and his coverage range was less than a kilometer. Therefore, Li Dihai's spiritual power hadn't detected Lin Shi yet. "Speak clearly. Which of our people? Don't you know my people went on a mission?" Li Dihai was impatient with blind Asin's panic. These civilians from this backward countryside had never seen the world, so they were easily frightened. Li Dihai began to doubt the wisdom of cooperating with these kinds of people. Blind Asin hurriedly recounted the situation to Li Shujia. Hearing this, Li Shujia turned pale and tremblingly translated for Li Dihai. "There's a man, like an ability user from the movies, riding a snowboard and charging into our base. Many people have already died. We can't hold him off at all. What ability user? Ask him if he's dreaming." Li Dihai sneered disdainfully. Li Dihai, a high-tier evolver, understood his own abilities: strength, speed, endurance, defense, healing, and spiritual power. If another high-tier evolver appeared, he would only believe two possibilities: ability user, or had this apocalypse turned into a movie or novel? Li Shujia hesitated, then asked the Asen again. Hearing that Li Dihai didn't believe him, the Asen's expression changed. Even though he had acted as obedient as a hound since meeting Li Dihai, it was only because he wanted Li Dihai's help to get stronger. In reality, the Asen was a ruthless man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rallied so many people to Tibet to oppress the survivors. Asan's eyes flickered with doubt. He didn't dare to get angry. On the very first day Li Dihai arrived, Asan had witnessed his strength. Now, facing a situation beyond his capabilities, he had no choice but to seek Li Dihai's help. And Nan stammered to Li Duojia, as Master Li Dihai was getting impatient. Li Duojia flattered him. "My lord, the leader said the intruder outside is very dangerous. Please lend us a hand and crush him like an ant." The leader added that once it was done, he would reward him with an origin pill. Li Dihai snorted in dissatisfaction. "Humph, just one intruder, and you commoners are scared out of your wits? You guys are really a bunch of useless dogs." That remark was aimed at Li Duojia. Li Duojia lowered his head, not daring to reply, let alone translate it for Asan. Li Dihai strode out of the snow hut, with Nan hurriedly following behind. At this moment, Lin Shi was slaughtering his way through the outside of the base. Asan's continuously charged at him, but the moment they got close, their lives were instantly reaped by the origin chi fragments. Lin Shi didn't even need to move a muscle. Dealing with these Tier 1 evolvers was much easier than killing origin beasts. The consumption of his spiritual power and origin chi was extremely low. If he had more origin chi fragments, Lin Shi felt he could wipe out the entire Asan base in a very short time. The Asan swarmed forward, but before they could even get close to Lin Shi, they all fell. Blood splattered everywhere, leaving only the spot where Lin Shi stood completely clean. Lin Shi stood there, as calm as a grim reaper who could harvest lives with just a single thought. "Devil!" an Asan shrieked in their native tongue. Most of the Asans were terrified by this gruesome sight and didn't dare to charge anymore. Screaming "Devil!" they turned and fled. However, the origin chi fragments controlled by Lin Shi were faster than bullets. The Asan's escape speed was far too slow compared to the fragments. Lin Shi casually scattered the origin chi, continuing to reap the lives of the Asans while advancing toward the center of the base. Li Dihai stepped out of the snow hut, frowned at the chaotic Asans, and walked in the opposite direction of their retreat. After taking a few steps, he stopped. With no one to stop him, Lin Shi quickly approached the center of the base. The origin chi fragments arrived ahead of Lin Shi, catching Li Dihai's eye. "What is this?" Li Dihai's two surviving subordinates asked, trembling. Li Dihai had originally looked down on superpowers, but now, seeing the shattered origin chi fragments flying at breakneck speed, his face was filled with horror. He attempted to catch the nearest fragment with his bare hands. Just as Li Dihai reached out, the fragment suddenly changed direction, shooting straight toward his neck at a deadly angle. Li Dihai's eyes widened in shock as he narrowly dodged it. "What the hell is this?" Li Dihai pulled out a broadsword from his back and slashed at the fragment with all his might. The fragment fell to the ground, and Li Dihai felt a brief moment of joy. But instantly, the fragment flew back up, completely unscathed, and continued to dart toward his vital spots. The fragment was too fast and too small. Li Dihai had to constantly dodge, even starting to feel exhausted. And that was just one of the dozens of fragments Lin Shi was controlling. Seeing the critical situation, the blind Asen stealthily backed away. Right after, Lin Shi appeared within Li Dihai's spiritual power range. He saw that all those metal fragments were swirling around the young man in front of him. With monstrous killing intent, Li Dihai roared in anger. "This pretty boy is playing tricks. Kill him for me." Deep down, Li Dihai was absolutely terrified. Was this really a superpower? How come he had lived in the Li family for so many years and never heard of such a thing? Li Dihai's subordinates drew their weapons and charged at Lin Shi. But these two Tier 2 evolvers had barely engaged before they were shredded to pieces by Lin Shi's metal storm. Lin Shi controlled the origin chi fragments, slaughtering the Asans and the other men around them. More and more metal fragments shot toward Li Dihai. Li Dihai's eyes bulged as he desperately dodged and parried, but he was still slashed with multiple wounds by the fragments. He no longer had his previous majestic aura and looked incredibly pathetic. I am from the Li family, one of the 4 great hidden families. Little brother, stop. Let's just call this a misunderstanding. Li Dihai ducked to avoid a few fragments, panting heavily. So you're Li Dihai. Lin Shi looked at him, confirming his identity. Yes, I am. I am an elder of the Li family. I have many treasures, and even pills to accelerate evolution. That's great. Then go to hell. Lin Shi summoned the remaining fragments and sent them hurtling straight at Li Dihai. Li Dihai completely panicked. Brat, leave a way out. You and I have no grudges. Do you really want to kill me? The survivors at the bottom of the plateau had no grudges against you either, yet you ordered your men to cause an avalanche. Weren't you trying to kill them? Lin Shi retorted. So you ran into my subordinates, and you killed them. Li Dihai wasn't stupid. He instantly understood everything. I can stop the avalanche. You can't kill me. Li Dihai never expected that a simple order to save time would lead to this bizarre disaster. I am from the Li family. My life is worth more than millions of ants. If you kill me here, the Li family will definitely flatten this place. If I kill you and destroy the evidence, it won't be a problem. Don't worry, no one in this base will escape. Lin Shi used the majority of the origin chi fragments to besiege Li Dihai, while simultaneously blanketing his subordinates with his spiritual power. And Nan and the other blind Asans were fleeing in panic. At the same time, he controlled the other fragments to continue harvesting the lives of the Asans. In no time, they were cleanly wiped out. Brat, you forced me. Seeing that Lin Shi truly intended to kill him, Li Dihai decisively took out a porcelain bottle from his pocket. He crushed the bottle and swallowed the pills inside. In an instant, Li Dihai's eyes turned blood red. Since you want to kill me, let's die together. He madly swung his broadsword, knocking away the origin chi fragments. His speed was nearly double what it was before. The fragments fell and flew back up, but they couldn't keep up with the speed of Li Dihai's slashes. Li Dihai let out a ferocious laugh, shattering fragments on one side while charging at Lin Shi. Initially, Li Dihai didn't believe in superpowers, but seeing Lin Shi control the fragments without moving a muscle, he believed that there were indeed superpowered individuals after the apocalypse. Li Dihai couldn't see through Lin Shi's true strength, but he thought that as long as he got close to this young man, he could definitely kill him. The metal storm is still lacking when dealing with a Tier 5 evolver. There are too few fragments. I need to prepare better next time, Lin Shi observed, rubbing his chin and muttering to himself. Li Dihai was only focused on the incoming fragments and didn't hear what Lin Shi said. His eyes were brimming with hatred. After taking the berserk pill, he had no way back. Now Li Dihai felt no pain. Even if he was pierced by the fragments, as long as he avoided his vital spots, he would be fine. Because of this, he charged at Lin Shi even faster. Now, he was determined to chop this brat into pieces and make him taste all the suffering in the world. As he got closer and closer to Lin Shi, the ferocity in Li Dihai's eyes deepened, his face twisting in malice. Li Dihai didn't know that Lin Shi was practicing multitasking. He was using the other fragments to wipe out the Asans. Seeing Li Dihai approaching, Lin Shi calmly glanced at him, took a light step, and was already standing behind Li Dihai. I just wanted to keep you alive to ask a few questions. Getting this close, are you trying to throw away your chance? Li Dihai's pupils shrank. This speed, you are. After taking the berserk pill, his potential was unlocked, giving him the strength of a Tier 5 evolver. Yet, he couldn't even see how Lin Shi got behind him. Impossible. How could this be? Outside the hidden families, how could anyone in this world reach Tier 6? Before he could utter the last 2 words, a crisp sound of breaking bones echoed in the silent space. Lin Shi had snapped Li Dihai's neck. Li Dihai died without understanding. It was just a simple mission. He just wanted to save time by having his subordinates cause an avalanche, yet he ran into such a god of death. He understood even less how Xia country could have someone so powerful. Weren't the strongest people in the world all within their 4 great families? Li Dihai's final thought was, so, the legend in the family's secret manual about Tier 6 and above is true. Unlocking Tier 6 grants extraordinary abilities. Lin Shi tossed Li Dihai's corpse aside. He controlled the origin chi fragments to scatter in all directions. Agonizing screams echoed endlessly. Lin Shi's spiritual power covered a 10-kilometer radius. Those Asans couldn't run far before they were all slaughtered. Tens of thousands of people, and Lin Shi didn't spare a single one. Not a single one of them was innocent. Right in this camp, Lin Shi even saw an elderly Xia country couple. The blind Asans frequently went to the survivor bases of the local Tibetans to rob them of food. But for a tribe of tens of thousands coming from the outside, how could that little bit of food be enough? Every snow hut had food hidden under the snow, salted or frozen, even human corpses, while dodging the metal fragments. The blind Asen pushed Li Duojia, who had always followed him closely, even abandoning his own parents, to shield himself. As a local who had defected to the Asans, Li Duojia offered his final value, his body as a meat shield. But the blind Asen still couldn't escape. After Lin Shi killed Li Dihai, all the metal fragments flew toward the Asans. The blind Asan was finally pierced by over a dozen fragments, dying with his eyes wide open. The thick stench of blood attracted a pack of native-origin beasts. Seeing the gray wolf pack appear, Lin Shi's icy expression softened slightly. He raised an eyebrow and released the Demon King and his wolf pack. "Go take a look and see if there are any suitable ones to be your underlings," Lin Shi told the Demon King. The Demon King also saw the wolf pack. Its heterochromatic eyes flashed with excitement. It let out a howl and led its subordinates to charge at the wolf pack. The wolf pack didn't need Lin Shi to worry about them. Looking at the piles of Asan corpses, Lin Shi frowned. With a thought, the corpses floated up and gathered in front of him, forming a mountain of dead bodies. This time, Lin Shi showed no mercy. He placed his hand on the mountain of corpses, looking at the treasure basin interface displaying the words "Absorb Origin Power," and softly said, "Yes, absorb." The treasure basin began to absorb the origin power. This base had over 40,000 people, among which nearly 10,000 were Tier 1 evolvers. These evolvers provided Lin Shi with a massive amount of origin power. Just like the first time he absorbed the Tier 6 mutated divine tree, the surging origin power caused the numbers on the treasure basin interface to jump continuously. Lin Shi didn't feel any discomfort during this absorption process. His Tier 6 physique far surpassed his previous Tier 5 state. Lin Shi's eyes didn't waver at all. In the past, he hated absorbing origin power from evolvers. It felt like cannibalism. But now, those who invade my Xia country deserve to die. While Lin Shi absorbed the origin power, the long-armed ape and the clouded leopard were released to stand guard around him. As for the Demon King, it had chased the wild wolf pack, which fled after realizing they were outmatched, running over 10 kilometers away. Howling as it ran, the Demon King charged into the wild wolf pack and attacked the Wolf King. With dozens of claw strikes, the Tier 3 Wolf King was beaten dizzy. Suddenly, the Demon King raised its head and looked in a certain direction. Over there, a group of giant pandas, seemingly also attracted by the smell of blood from the Asen base, was running over. The Demon King's eyes lit up. It kicked away the Tier 3 Wolf King lying at its feet and charged toward the pandas. "Awoo! Brothers, leave those hounds alone. The big catch is here." After absorbing all the origin power from the mountain of corpses, Lin Shi glanced at the treasure basin interface. Owner data: Lin Shi, 20 years old, male. Evolution level: Tier 6 gene lock. Origin power: 1 unit. Spiritual power: 5,234 units. Telekinesis. Abilities: promote plant growth, animal control. With a mere thought, all the corpses in the base vanished without a trace. Leaving these bodies here would only attract more and more origin beasts, so he stored them in his spatial dimension, waiting to find a suitable place to dispose of them later. Once done, Lin Shi turned to look at the long-armed ape and the clouded leopard obediently guarding beside him. The Demon King still hadn't returned. At this moment, Lin Shi used his spiritual power and saw Xiaobai, the Demon King's second-in-command, returning. Xiaobai ran up to Lin Shi and barked urgently, signaling Lin Shi to follow it. The Demon King had sent Xiaobai to inform Lin Shi of its discovery, but Xiaobai only understood human speech and couldn't write like the Demon King. Guessing that the Demon King had encountered a strong enemy, Lin Shi took out his snowboard. With his animal control ability, Snowboarding was much faster than running. The snowboard shot out like an arrow, speeding in the opposite direction from where Xiao Bai had come. Xiao Bai, the long-armed ape, and the clouded leopard hurriedly chased after him. The Demon King was busy. It was leading the wolf pack to slowly herd the giant pandas, occasionally roaring to scare them, but not letting the wolves attack. The giant pandas fled in panic. There was no beast king among this group of pandas. The Demon King remembered that Lin Shi wanted to subdue the beast king. It knew that as long as it chased these pandas, it would definitely find the trail of the Tier 6 beast king, and its master could follow the tracks it left behind. Whoa! Not long after, Lin Shi caught up with the Demon King's wolf pack on his snowboard, blocking their path. He also stored Xiao Bai, the long-armed ape, and the ones that couldn't keep up into his spatial dimension. From a distance, Lin Shi had already used his spiritual power to spot the group of giant pandas. Seeing them, Lin Shi understood that the Sichuan Beast King had fled here. He had been regretting losing the trail of that intelligent Beast King for days. He didn't expect that after searching to no avail, it would deliver itself to his doorstep. Discovering the giant panda's tracks again, this time, he was determined to subdue that Tier 6 Beast King. Demon King. You did great, Lin Shi praised as he skated up to the Demon King. The giant pandas were chased to the point of exhaustion, only running in circles to lead Lin Shi and the others on a wild goose chase. It seemed they were trained not to reveal the Beast King's hideout. Lin Shi chased them for a while, then told the Demon King to stop and stored all the origin beasts except the Demon King into his spatial dimension. The Demon King looked at Lin Shi in confusion. Let them think we've given up first. Wait until they drop their guard and return to the Beast King. Lin Shi instructed the Demon King. My spiritual power range is very wide. They are very smart and know not to expose their lair, so we just need to keep our distance. Before dark, they will definitely head back. Sure enough, when the giant pandas realized the wolf pack from Sichuan was no longer chasing them, they found a place to rest, caught 2 origin beasts, ate one, and rested until late afternoon. Then, they dragged the remaining one toward a canyon. Step by step, Lin Shi and the Demon King followed them. It wasn't until pitch dark that they finally discovered the giant panda's lair within his spiritual power range. But Lin Shi wasn't in a hurry to enter the canyon. Don't go over there. You stand guard here. I'll go check the surroundings first, Lin Shi instructed the Demon King. Ever since he learned that the Tier 6 Beast King was highly intelligent, Lin Shi no longer acted recklessly. Now that he knew the Beast King had spiritual power, its sense of smell must also be very sharp. So Lin Shi didn't probe the canyon with his spiritual power to avoid alerting the snake by beating the grass. He observed the surrounding terrain first. Just from the outskirts, Lin Shi saw that this canyon had several exits. From the outside, it looked like there was only one way in, but inside, there were many branching paths. The terrain was incredibly complex. It would be impossible for the Demon King and the others to surround all the exits. But Lin Shi's goal wasn't to catch all the origin beasts. He only wanted the Beast King. Observing the terrain, a plan quickly formed in his mind. Although the canyon's terrain was complex, there was a massive amount of snow piled up above it. Moreover, the area around the canyon was desolate. I didn't expect that I'd be stopping someone from causing an avalanche this morning, only to cause one myself tonight. Let's see how you escape this time. Returning to the Demon King, Lin Shi patted its somewhat unruly head and whispered in its ear, Demon King, I have a mission for you. Nearly half an hour later, a chorus of wolf howls suddenly echoed above the canyon. The continuous howling woke up the giant panda Hualan, who was just about to rest. It vigilantly used its spiritual power and saw the wild wolf pack above the canyon, assuming they were preparing for a night attack. Unexpectedly, the wild wolf pack just stood at the top of the canyon, howling endlessly with no intention of coming down. Just as Hualan slightly lowered its guard, a massive block of snow above the canyon suddenly slid down. Like a chain reaction, one block pulled another. In just a few breaths, more and more accumulated snow cascaded down into the canyon with a deafening roar. No matter how smart the giant panda Hualan was, it didn't understand the mechanics of an avalanche, nor did it know why these blocks of snow were falling. It could only roar, ordering the beast herd to flee. Seeing this display of nature's raw power, The beast herd instantly panicked and scattered throughout the canyon. But during an avalanche, the sheer weight of the piled-up snow made it fall incredibly fast. The complex terrain here, which could normally help them evade enemies and escape, now became a prison restricting their flight. The giant panda Hualan was blocked at an intersection by the panicking beast herd. Watching the sky full of snow crashing down, its round eyes were filled with fear and terror. This was the instinct of all wild beasts, an innate dread of nature's unknown power. Hualan stared as the avalanche engulfed them. Right before being buried, it seemed to see the face of the human from Sichuan that it hated to the core. Lin Shi stood above the canyon, watching the beast herd being swallowed by the avalanche. The Demon King came to Lin Shi's side, looking at the collapsed snow below in confusion. Don't rush. This avalanche is nothing to high-tier origin beasts. Origin beasts have sturdy bodies, and the canyon isn't that deep. Any tier 3 origin beast can survive this avalanche. They'll dig themselves out. Howl a few times to give them a location. Being buried by an avalanche, if they survive, they need to quickly find the direction to dig out of the snow. Many people buried by avalanches don't die from the impact, but because they lose their sense of direction while trying to escape, eventually suffocating or freezing to death. The Demon King didn't know this, but it was very obedient. As soon as Lin Shi finished speaking, it howled downward. Soon enough, the snow pile in the canyon shifted, and one by one, the origin beasts that heard the sound emerged from the snow like moles. It's time to welcome our new teammates. Lin Shi used his snowboard to balance and slid down, while storing the Demon King and the wild wolves into his spatial dimension. Those wild wolves were the ones the Demon King had just subdued today. To chase the giant pandas, the Demon King had sent the Wolf King flying, pursued the pandas, and earned the acknowledgement and submission of the Wild Wolf King. Perhaps in the Wild Wolf King's world, following a stronger wolf was the best way to survive. Lin Shi had already pinpointed the location of the Tier 6 Beast King, but he waited on the snow pile covering Hualan, just in case the enemy decided to fight to the death upon meeting. Lin Shi stored the Demon King and the others, then released the tyrant and Xiao Ciyuan along with its mother. Who knows? Maybe the presence of their own kind would earn him some extra points in the eyes of the Tier 6 giant panda. The giant panda Hualan quickly dug its way out from under the snow. Seeing Lin Shi, Hualan roared in anger. Standing close, Lin Shi noticed that the Beast King's roar carried a wave of spiritual energy. The origin beasts that had emerged from the surrounding snow heard Hualan's call and immediately gathered toward Lin Shi. Lin Shi was startled. Was this the ability of a Tier 6 origin beast? He ignored those origin beasts and stared straight into the eyes of the giant panda Hualan, saying, "You are very smart. You should know that if I wanted to, I could kill you right in front of your subordinates." Hualan let out a threatening growl, seemingly trying to prove it wasn't to be trifled with. "You understand spiritual energy and possess intelligence, huh? Offensive capabilities must be your weakness." This was the smallest Tier 6 origin beast he had ever seen, yet it had this bizarre ability. Lin Shi had already guessed it. If it weren't in Sichuan, this giant panda wouldn't have run so desperately. Hualan understood Lin Shi's words. Having its weakness exposed, it grew furious. It roared and charged forward, and the other origin beasts followed suit. Lin Shi's eyes turned cold. He waved his hand, and dozens of origin chi fragments hovered in the air, shooting rapidly toward Hualan. Hualan's eyes widened, and it squeezed its eyes shut in fear, but the expected pain never came. It opened its eyes to see all the fragments hovering steadily around it, not harming it in the slightest. Meanwhile, Hualan's subordinates had been blocked by Lin Shi's suddenly appearing army of origin beasts. But even so, Hualan still growled threateningly. A Beast King would never submit. Lin Shi frowned. He wanted the Beast King and its subordinates to retain their combat strength for when he subdued them, so he didn't want to resort to a massacre. But seeing that this Tier 6 origin beast refused to yield, he had no choice but to use the law of the jungle. Just as Lin Shi was about to make a move, the tyrant suddenly cried out. Lin Shi seemed to remember something. "I'm just testing you. I come with sincerity, wanting to be your friend. As long as you fight alongside me, I will provide you with food, fruits, sorghum bread, and basin milk every day, unlimited." Hualan's eyes went wide. Hualan's small eyes revealed a look of longing. It had been almost a year since it had eaten the things Lin Shi mentioned. Every night in its dreams, it dreamt of eating fruits, sorghum bread, and basin milk. But it didn't act rashly. Who wasn't a smart giant panda? What if this human, who hated mankind, was tricking it? But as if guessing what Hualan was thinking, Lin Shi took out a fresh, crisp apple from his spatial dimension. He placed the apple on the snow, right in front of the Tier 6 giant panda that was rolling around. From the moment the apple appeared in Lin Shi's hand, its round eyes were glued to it. Its gaze followed the apple as it rolled right to its feet. Instantly, it took a bite without any guard. Crunch, crunch. The sweet, familiar fragrance. Hot tears welled up in Hualan's eyes. It remembered acting spoiled. Seeing this beast king eating until its eyes sparkled. Thinking there was hope, Lin Shi took the opportunity to pull out the sorghum bread he used to feed the tyrant from his spatial dimension, twirling it in his hand. Just follow me, and you'll have these delicious treats every day. I have lots and lots of them. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Hualan trotted toward Lin Shi, stood up on its hind legs, and reached out for the sorghum bread in his hand. Lin Shi tossed the sorghum bread to it. In an instant, the surrounding origin beasts stopped attacking. Watching the Tier 6 giant panda eat the sorghum bread, Lin Shi asked in a gentle voice, "My name is Lin Shi. What's your name?" Hualan looked at Lin Shi, then wrote the two characters Hualan on the snow. Seeing that Hualan actually knew how to write, Lin Shi smiled. His smile was as warm as the May sunshine. "Welcome. From now on, you are my companion." Hualan squeaked in response to Lin Shi. The Demon King stood to the side, looking at the characters the giant panda had written, and frowned. The look it gave Hualan held a hint of hostility and jealousy, as if saying, "You're trying to steal my favor." Lin Shi told Hualan about his spatial dimension that could house living creatures, saying that they would normally need to stay in there often, and that the space had a comfortable temperature and was completely safe. Hualan nodded without hesitation, even wanting to bring all its subordinates inside. Lin Shi naturally agreed. After weeding out most of the low-tier origin beasts, Hualan's beast herd still had over 400 members, including nearly 100 giant pandas and various other origin beasts. None of these origin beasts were below Tier 3. There were over a dozen Tier 4s and one Tier 5. Including Hualan, this force was even stronger than Lin Shi's three-headed origin beast army. Both the Demon King and Hualan were Tier 6. Either of them was strong enough to be a beast king dominating a region. But a mountain cannot house two tigers, so the issue of hierarchy had to be resolved. The Demon King had followed Lin Shi since the beginning of the apocalypse. The bond between them couldn't be replaced by just any origin beast. Compared to the Demon King, Hualan was naturally far behind. Lin Shi let Hualan and the Demon King duel to determine the hierarchy. In reality, the Demon King definitely wouldn't lose. Hualan was very easygoing. It fought one round and immediately conceded. To Hualan, its initial goal was just for the beast herd to survive the apocalypse and have full bellies. Now that Lin Shi had appeared and fulfilled Hualan's wishes, it naturally agreed. Lin Shi divided Hualan's beast herd into 4 groups. The giant pandas were still managed by Hualan, while the rest of the origin beasts were distributed to the long-armed ape, the clouded leopard, and the Demon King. Training their loyalty and coordination would take a long time and couldn't be rushed. Fortunately, Lin Shi hunted down a lot of Genesis beasts along the way. He used his replication ability a few times to double the amount of meat, solving the food rations for over 600 beasts. Patting the Demon King's somewhat unruly head, Lin Shi stored all the other Genesis beasts into his spatial storage, except for the Demon King and the rabbit rat. The rabbit rat was tucked into his hood. Lin Shi continued his journey with the Demon King, heading toward the distant mountains. Half a month later, Lin Shi, the rabbit rat, and the Demon King crossed the plateau. The plateau was rich in herbs. Over the past half-month, Lin Shi had found dozens of mutated herbs. Unfortunately, none were high-tier. The highest was only Tier 3. For him right now, Tier 3 mutated herbs weren't of much use. On the contrary, the cyan gold plant could grow into a mutated herb that enhanced spiritual power. Under his continuous stimulation, it had mutated and seemed to be evolving. Currently, Each harvest granted Lin Shi 300 spiritual power points. The original survivors who had been forced to relocate from the plateau. Seeing that there was no avalanche, some had returned to their old campsites. During this time, Lin Shi happened to run into a local. The man had gone up the mountain to find medicine for his severely ill family member. Seeing Lin Shi dressed in simple white clothes, accompanied by the giant, snow-white demon king appearing on the mountain, the local was as shocked as if he had seen a god and immediately knelt down to bow to Lin Shi. Since the man wasn't speaking Mandarin, Lin Shi couldn't understand a word he said and simply left quickly. Unbeknownst to him, after he left, the local dug up a dead herb frozen in the snow from the hole where Lin Shi had extracted the mutated herb. The survivor considered it a gift from the gods, firmly believing that Lin Shi was a deity. On top of that, people soon discovered that Asan and his group had vanished without a trace, their bloodstains covered by the heavy snow. They believed that Lin Shi's appearance had eradicated the disaster for them, viewing him as their savior god. From then on, a legend circulated across the plateau. The legend spoke of a white-robed, white-haired god on the plateau thousands of meters high, riding a snow-white wolf. Whenever this god sensed a disaster at the foot of the mountain, he would descend to save them from danger. Lin Shi was completely unaware of all this. After traveling all over the plateau, Lin Shi left. With a snowboard under his feet, the demon king on his left, the long-armed ape on his right, and the rabbit rat in his hood, he headed toward his next target, the Li family's base in a small Southeast Asian country. Patriarch Li, who was over 70 years old this year, was half reclining on a massive chair made of mutated tiger skin. On either side, two young women were massaging his legs. A beautiful girl, scantily clad, was nestled in Patriarch Li's arms. Patriarch Li ate the roasted meat the girl fed him, enjoying the warmth of her body, while listening to his subordinates report. Patriarch, we have news about Li Dihai. Yesterday, our people reached the province in the Xia Nation. The last place Li Dihai appeared was the Asan base in Ji City. However, half a month ago, the entire Asan base, including Li Dihai, vanished without a trace. Vanished? Are you sure that dog Li Dihai didn't just find a mutated herb and run off on his own? Patriarch Li narrowed his eyes and said, we dug up a massive amount of bloodstains in the area beneath the Asan base. Such a large volume of blood proves that the entire campsite was massacred. But strangely, we didn't find any bodies of the Asan people. We only found a few severed limbs, but those belonged to people who had died earlier. Our preliminary guess is that those severed limbs were probably the Asan group's emergency food supply. Based on the information gathered from the locals and the on-site investigation, we suspect this large-scale massacre was caused by a horde of wild beasts. That's why there are no bodies left. As for Li Dihai, he's probably dead too. Li Hongli, the patriarch of the Li family, finally pushed the girl beside him away and sat up straight. Useless trash. Can't even handle a small task. He opened his squinted eyes, revealing a seasoned, profound gaze. Glancing around, he said, if it was a massive beast horde, did anyone see it? That day, the Asan people notified the other survivor campsites that they wanted to trigger an avalanche, so the campsites at the foot of the mountain were all relocating. No one noticed if a beast horde appeared or not. Triggering an avalanche? That must be that idiot's stupid idea. Li Hongli narrowed his eyes, the corners of his eyes full of wrinkles. So, did the people who went this time find that cordyceps? No, sir. The subordinate carefully observed Li Hongli's expression and said, we found traces of digging all over the plateau. We suspect someone got there first. Got there first? Wasn't the Qi family already wiped out? Could it be the Xia nation's government? Li Hongli frowned deeply, the wrinkles on his face bunching up so much they almost pinched his nose. The incident had happened months ago. Li Hongli naturally knew the news of the Qi family's annihilation. But what did that have to do with him? It was precisely because the Xia nation no longer had the Qi family that Li Hongli allowed Li Dihai to openly appear in the Xia nation to search for mutated plants. The subordinate said, someone saw a humanoid creature and a giant white wolf on the mountain. The survivors there said it was an angel. Bullshit angel. There are no gods in this world. Li Hongli furiously swiped his hand, knocking away the teacup the young girl offered him. The piping hot teacup crashed to the floor and shattered. The stunningly beautiful girl knelt on the ground, trembling. The subordinate also fell silent, not daring to utter another word. Li Hongli's cloudy eyes flickered with anger and a hint of contemplation. As a member of a hidden family, Li Hongli knew there were no gods in this world. Gods were merely people whose power had reached a certain level. But now, the situation was baffling. He suddenly felt that the disappearance of tens of thousands of people at the Asan campsite might not have been caused by a beast horde. After a moment of silence, Li Hongli spoke up, "Send out the order. Put all our efforts into searching for mutated plants in places that had lush vegetation before the apocalypse. The Xian Nation isn't the only place. Send more people to the Amazon basin. You must find mutated plants and bring them back to me. Patriarch, the Amazon basin is in South America. That's the Chun family's territory." The subordinate remembered something and reminded him. Chun family's territory, my ass. The whole world is ownerless now. If you run into the Chun family's people, just be polite first and figure it out later. But if you find any mutated plants, absolutely do not back down. The time is ripe. Clean up the loose ends nicely, understand? Li Hongli glared fiercely at his subordinate and said in a deep voice. Although he looked merely 70, his actual age was nearly 300. He was a Tier 5 powerhouse. After unlocking the Tier 5 gene, one's lifespan could increase significantly, but that was it. Li Hongli had a premonition that his time would be up within 10 years. If he didn't find a way to break through to Tier 6, he didn't have many good years left to live. This was something he absolutely could not accept. If it weren't for this Ice Age apocalypse, he would have resigned himself to fate, lived out the rest of his life, and died. But now, the whole world was filled with opportunities for a breakthrough. Let him sit around and wait for death? Impossible. Terrified by Li Hongli's gaze, the subordinate hastily agreed. At that moment, another subordinate reported, "Patriarch, the young master requests an audience." "Let him in. You step down. Hurry up and gather people for the search." The subordinate took the order, bowed, and backed away. A young man, about 25 or 26 years old, walked into the room. "Great-grandfather." Li Chun entered the room and immediately performed a grand bow. "Little Chun, there's no need for such formalities in front of me. What's the matter?" Li Hongli looked at his great-grandson, his voice carrying undisguised doting. Li Chun respectfully stood up. "Great-grandfather, aren't you looking for mutated medicine? I heard that Changbai Mountain in the Xian Nation is covered in snow all year round, but it has a lot of wild ginseng. I want to go find a root for you." Li Hongli was overjoyed but still refused. "My good grandson, the Xian Nation is far from here. It's too dangerous. Let your third uncle and sixth uncle go." Although Li Chun was young, he had already unlocked the Tier 4 gene. Li Hongli couldn't bear to let him take risks. "It's fine. I heard that the northern part of the Xian Nation has almost become a forbidden survival zone. Even Genesis beasts are rare. I'll bring a lot of people with me. More importantly, I really want to show my filial piety to you, great-grandfather," Li Chun said earnestly. His phoenix eyes were filled with deep respect for Li Hongli. Seeing Li Chun's determination, Li Hongli finally agreed. "All right, then you can go. Tell your third uncle and sixth uncle to go with you. Take a few more people. You must be careful. 2 months ago, your second uncle subdued a Tier 4 fierce tiger. I'll have him give it to you. Tame it before you set off. I'll also have someone prepare more medicine for you," Li Hongli instructed repeatedly. Li Chun agreed, asked Li Hongli a few caring questions, and then left. Only upon returning to his own manor did Li Chun drop the obedient facade from his face. This great-grandfather had killed the entire family, his great-great-grandfather, his great-grandfather, and his father. But this time, he wouldn't let himself become the next victim. Li Chun's obedient smile vanished, replaced by a vicious expression. "Within 3 months, upgrade that 30-year veteran ginseng digger from Changbai Mountain to Tier 3 for me. When I arrive in the Xian Nation, you must ensure he doesn't freeze to death at -130 degrees." "Yes, master." Lin Shi left Tibet province, passed through Gansu, and swept across the region from west to east. Finally, after 3 months, in the summer of the second year of the apocalypse, he reached the northern part of the Xian Nation, now a forbidden survival zone. Even in summer, the average temperature there was still below -100 degrees Celsius. As summer arrived, The temperature in the Xian nation rose again, but ever since Lin Shi headed north, survivors and Genesis beasts became increasingly rare along the way. Low-tier Genesis beasts and ordinary people could hardly survive in this extreme cold. The West Province used to have troops stationed there, but when Lin Shi passed through, he encountered a military unit moving the only remaining survivors southward. Lin Shi briefly asked around. They were heading to Sha City. He heard that the Sha City base was almost complete and could accommodate hundreds of thousands of people. Because the temperature in the north was dropping lower and lower, they didn't know if they could survive this year's winter, so they decided on a mass migration to Sha City to join forces with Lin Chanrui's army. Lin Shi pointed out a relatively accurate route to the officer who provided the information, and then they parted ways. After that, he headed straight north to the capital. Actually, at first, Lin Shi didn't know he was in the capital. Before coming to the north, he hadn't expected the snow here to be this thick, 2 or 3 times deeper than in the south. Blizzards often lasted for days and nights. In many places, not even the buildings could be seen. Lin Shi wasn't familiar with the northern terrain. Even with a map, it was hard to pinpoint his exact location. If it weren't for his spiritual power scanning through the thick snow to the ancient underground architecture, Lin Shi might not have realized that this was once one of the most prosperous cities in the Xian nation before the apocalypse. The capital. Before the apocalypse, and even in his past life, Lin Shi had never been to the capital because of his adoptive father. And after the apocalypse, he had even less of a chance to set foot in the north. In truth, he had always wanted to visit the capital, to see Tiananmen, to see the Forbidden City. But after the apocalypse, when he finally set foot on this land, the familiar sights from TV were buried under a vast expanse of white snow. Everything before his eyes was desolate, leaving Lin Shi feeling a bit disappointed and lost. However, he quickly pulled himself together. After 3 months of searching for mutated plants and aiding their growth, Lin Shi's spiritual power had reached a terrifying 8,556 points. The situation within a hectare radius of the capital was entirely under the control of his spiritual power. He walked and probed around. No one. Still no one. He couldn't even spot a single Genesis beast. This place was like an absolute wasteland. There was nothing at all. Lin Shi knew that the Xian nation's higher-ups had previously relocated many high-ranking officials and elites to the capital. Seeing how low the temperature was in the capital, he assumed there was no one left here. But unexpectedly, just as he was about to leave after observing the entire capital, he stumbled upon traces of human activity. Huh. Lin Shi frowned slightly. Demon King, you guys head back to the space first. Storing the Demon King and the long-armed ape into his spatial dimension, he decided to press forward. After walking for over 10 kilometers, Lin Shi spotted human footprints on the ground. The capital was in the middle of a heavy snowstorm, so these tracks were clearly fresh. Lin Shi followed the footprints for a while. Finally, within the range of his mental energy, he detected a few survivors clad in animal skins, digging frantically in the snow. Among that group was a Tier 3 evolver, while the other 6 were all Tier 2. Using his mental energy, Lin Shi could clearly see what they were digging for. Beneath the thick layer of snow was a buried gas station. These people were trying to scavenge for fuel. He walked over, his pace neither fast nor slow, approaching the group. When Lin Shi entered a 50-meter radius, someone finally noticed him. Someone's here. The Tier 3 evolver stared warily in Lin Shi's direction, lowering his voice to warn the others. The rest immediately dropped their shovels, drawing weapons from their backs or waists, ready for a fight. Because the snowstorm today was quite heavy, visibility was obscured by a white haze even at just 50 meters. However, since they were all evolvers, their eyesight was excellent. Seeing that it was just a human silhouette and not some massive beast, many of them breathed a sigh of relief. Only the Tier 3 evolver remained on high alert. He watched Lin Shi approach until he was about 10 meters away, then shouted, "Stop right there." "Who are you?" Lin Shi replied, "I'm from out of town. I just want to ask you guys for directions." "Out of town? Are there even people still alive out there?" A middle-aged Tier 2 evolver asked in astonishment. The Tier 3 evolver also frowned. He scrutinized Lin Shi closely, his eyes full of vigilance and suspicion, then said, "What do you want to ask? Ask, and then get out of here." Lin Shi blinked a few times. I want to ask for the way to Changbai Mountain. Do you guys know if there are any distinct landmarks or structures at the foot of the mountain? Changbai Mountain. We're from the capital. We've never been to Changbai Mountain. The Tier 3 evolver, Ma Chong, replied, and the men behind him chimed in to confirm. That Changbai Mountain area, it's got to be at least minus 130 degrees by now. You'll freeze solid. Kid, I suggest you just go home. Yeah, it's freezing cold right now, and everything is completely white. If I couldn't see the sun, I wouldn't even be able to tell which way is which. How are you even going to find Changbai Mountain? Lin Shi naturally knew the situation. The snow up north was way too thick. Without his mental energy, if he didn't run into anyone on the road, he wouldn't even know where he was. Even with a map to determine the general direction and location, pinpointing a specific, exact spot was incredibly difficult. Searching blindly like a headless fly would definitely waste a lot of time. As long as he knew the specific layout of Changbai Mountain, he could use his mental energy to pinpoint its exact location. On this point, he was still very confident. I have business to attend to at Changbai Mountain. If you can provide me with information about the layout of the buildings around it, or any distinct landmarks, I can trade a windproof lighter and other supplies for the info. Lin Shi made his offer directly, using a small bag as cover to pull a windproof lighter out of his spatial dimension. Nowadays, even a regular lighter was a precious commodity, let alone a windproof one. There was no need to explain how crucial a fire source was to survivors. Seeing Lin Shi propose a trade and pull out the lighter, the expressions on the men's faces shifted. A Tier 2 evolver eyed the windproof lighter in Lin Shi's hand, then leaned in and whispered into Ma Chang's ear. Captain, don't we have a girl at our base who came to the capital for work from Jilin province and got stuck here? I remember her hometown is in the Changbai Mountain area. She might know something. The Tier 2 evolver's voice was very low, and the howling snowstorm raged all around them. The others couldn't hear what he said, but this distance was nothing to Lin Shi's exceptional hearing. A glint of joy flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. He thought there was hope, but Ma Chong glared fiercely at the evolver who had just whispered to him, then turned back to Lin Shi. We don't know the location of Changbai Mountain either. Sorry, little brother. My hands are tied. Lin Shi narrowed his eyes. Knowing full well the man was lying, he still smirked, glanced at the sky, and said, It's getting pretty late. I wonder if I could stay here for the night. I'll pay you with supplies. No way. In times like these, we have to put safety first. So, sorry, but you'll have to go somewhere else. Ma Chong flatly refused. Lin Shi stayed silent for 2 seconds. He both approved of Ma Chang's vigilance and found it to be a massive headache. In this situation, he actually wished the other party was just a bunch of greedy fools. As Ma Chong and the others grew increasingly tense, Lin Shi said, Forget it then. If this way doesn't work, I'll just try another. With that, Lin Shi turned and walked away without a moment's hesitation. Only when Lin Shi was completely out of sight did the men dare to speak to each other. Captain, why didn't we trade with him? We're in desperate need of fire-starting gear. Ma Chong replied calmly, Think about it. An outsider who isn't from the capital. How could he possibly travel here all by himself from somewhere else in temperatures below minus 100 degrees? Did you guys notice his clothes? They were spotless, and he was barely wearing anything. It wouldn't keep him warm at all. Who among you could survive wearing that in this temperature? That young guy? Could he be a Tier 3 evolver? Tier 3? Ma Chong shook his head. I'd say he's at least Tier 4. Even at Tier 3, I wouldn't dare travel far from home alone in these conditions, let alone all the way to Changbai Mountain. What? He's as strong as Captain Fong. But he looks even scrawnier than my kid, Xiao Cohen. Yeah, he looks like a student. The captain is right. If he's just a student, how could he travel here alone from out of town? The men were all full of suspicion. Stop worrying about him and keep digging. We absolutely cannot bring someone with an unknown background back with us. Did you guys forget what happened with Lu Hui last time? Ma Chong stopped them from wasting time gossiping. The men seemed to recall something and immediately fell silent, dropping the discussion to resume their digging. They thought Lin Shi had gone far away and couldn't hear them. Little did they know, even though Lin Shi was already a kilometer away, he was still using his mental energy to hear every single word they said. Sure enough, most of the survivors in the apocalypse were smart, but he absolutely had to get that information about Changbai Mountain. So, he had no choice but to use some other methods. A little trickery. The men climbed out of the snow pit, carrying several full jerrycans of fuel. After making sure there was nothing unusual around, they cautiously circled the area a few times before arriving at a section of the capital's old district. Then, they found the inconspicuous marker they had left early that morning in the flat snow. After another bout of digging, they unearthed a large steel plate. Ma Chong lifted the plate, revealing a pitch-black, bottomless pit underneath. There was a ladder on the side of the pit to climb down. Just like always, go down one by one. Old Zhao, you go first, Ma Chong ordered. Lin Shi tailed them all the way to the end before finally discovering where their base was. So it's underground. Dozens of meters below the surface lay an old but massive underground city. Lin Shi swept the area with his mental energy, estimating the number of people down there. Around 40 to 50,000 people. More than half were ordinary humans. The rest, about a third, were only Tier 1 mutants. Even Tier 1 mutants would have a hard time enduring the temperatures outside. Lin Shi wondered how so many people had managed to survive this long in such freezing conditions. He noticed a substantial amount of dry rations underground. Could this place have stockpiled food before the apocalypse? With so much food and so many survivors, it made sense why they were so on edge. Ma Chong and the others climbed down the pit one by one until only Ma Chong was left. Just as he was about to descend, a voice suddenly rang out beside him. What are you guys doing here? Is your base down there? Ma Chong jumped, nearly dropping the steel plate in his hands. He whipped around. Lin Shi was standing less than 2 meters away, and he hadn't noticed a thing. This situation, Ma Chong knew that silencing him was the best option, but he guessed he was no match for the young man in front of him. While he was internally struggling, Lin Shi spoke up. I mean no harm. If I did, I would have killed you all and taken your stuff by now. Ma Chang's face paled. Just as I thought, he muttered inwardly. What do you want? I just want to know the situation at Changbai Mountain, Lin Shi said seriously. Ma Chang's expression shifted rapidly before he finally gritted his teeth and said, Follow me. But I'm warning you, our leader is a Tier 4 powerhouse. Don't try anything funny. At this point, he had no choice but to let Lin Shi in. The entrance to the underground city had been exposed. He couldn't beat him, and the guy could easily force his way in anyway. Now, Ma Chong could only hope that Lin Shi was telling the truth about being harmless. Lin Shi chuckled and walked right past Ma Chong. I really don't mean any harm. Then, he climbed down the pit. The men waiting for Ma Chong at the bottom were startled to see Lin Shi coming down and immediately raised their weapons to attack. Fortunately, Ma Chong quickly followed Lin Shi down. Once Ma Chong was inside, he lowered the steel plate, sealing the old entrance. The howling snow quickly buried the hatch, and soon enough, this patch of snow looked no different from its surroundings. Stand down, Ma Chong shouted loudly, then lowered his voice and said to one of the men, Old Zhao, go inform the leader right now. We have a guest. Old Zhao shot Lin Shi a few glances, put away his weapon, and hurried deep into the tunnel. He was clearly going to warn the underground city to prepare. Lin Shi remained unfazed. He had shown up uninvited, so it was only natural for them to be on guard. Having pinpointed the underground city's location, the entire place was now within the range of his mental energy. He wasn't the least bit afraid of them trying anything malicious. Before long, Lin Shi followed Ma Chong deep into the heart of the underground city. A dignified-looking middle-aged man, around 40 years old, hurried over with a group of people. After exchanging a glance with Ma Chong, the middle-aged man focused on Lin Shi. He extended a calloused hand and said, I am the leader of this underground city, Fang Zhenkai. Brother, may I ask your name? My name is Lin Shi. Lin Shi reached out and shook Fang Zhenkai's hand. The moment their hands met, a massive surge of strength transmitted from the other man's grip. Lin Shi's expression remained placid. This level of force was nothing more than a tickle to him. Fang Zhenkai, however, slightly changed his expression. He felt as if his hand was gripping a solid block of hot steel. No matter how much force he applied, it wouldn't budge an inch. This made Fang Zhenkai realize that Lin Shi was no ordinary guy. Seeing the man still applying pressure, Lin Shi casually added a bit of his own strength. Just that tiny bit of force made Fang Zhenkai feel an overwhelming, crushing power bearing down on him. He could even hear his own bones creaking under the immense pressure. Just as he felt his bones were about to shatter, Right before he could cry out in pain, Lin Shi let go. Lin Shi smiled, shaking his hand as he said, "Leader Fang sure has a strong grip." Ouch, my hand hurts. Hearing this, the others suddenly understood. So when Captain Fang and this kid shook hands, they were actually testing each other's strength. The leader wanted to use his grip strength to put this kid in his place. As expected of our leader, everyone wore expressions of understanding and admiration. Only Fang Zhengkai pulled back his trembling hand and let it hang by his side. He began to carefully study the fair-skinned, handsome young man standing before him. Fang Zhengkai knew the other party had held back. With that kind of grip strength, he could have easily humiliated him in front of everyone. After that handshake, Fang Zhengkai realized that in terms of raw power, he was absolutely no match for this seemingly gentle young man. Furthermore, he couldn't sense the slightest fluctuation of origin energy from Lin Shi. Despite his internal shock, Fang Zhengkai was no fool. He understood that this person's tier was absolutely higher than his own. Such a powerful person had still saved his face even when he tried to assert dominance. This made Fang Zhengkai feel both grateful and deeply respectful. He returned the courtesy with an inviting gesture. "Brother Lin, please." This gesture was reserved only for those of equal or higher status, showing both goodwill and respect. Lin Shi nodded and walked forward with a smile. The subordinates Fang Zhengkai had summoned initially thought there was going to be a fierce battle. They were completely caught off guard. Their leader, who was usually sharp-tongued, was acting so friendly toward this strange young man after trying to put him in his place. "What are you all standing around for? Old Diao, go roast some meat. I want to host our esteemed guest." "Yes, sir." The others were dumbfounded, and the men who had come with Ma Chong were even more clueless about what was going on. Did old Zhao not make it clear to Captain Fang how dangerous this young man is? Only Ma Chong stared intently at Fang Zhengkai's still trembling hand, the very hand that had just shaken Lin Shi's. His eyes were incredibly solemn. Fang Zhengkai was actually no match for this young man. This underground city looked quite old. The intersecting corridors were lined with small rooms, most of which had no doors or any sort of cover. Every dozen meters or so along the hallways, a single light bulb provided illumination. Inside those small rooms were survivors dressed in rags, looking incredibly filthy. Most of them were pale and emaciated. Their eyes were dull and cloudy. As Lin Shi and Fang Zhengkai walked by, they merely cast apathetic, starving glances their way. "Food is scarce here, so we have to ration it very strictly. Anyone willing to go out and hunt beasts or scavenge for supplies gets 2 full meals a day. The rest are only given enough to survive." Lin Shi's strength and aura commanded Fang Zhengkai's respect. Fang Zhengkai briefed Lin Shi on the situation in the underground city. "Won't these people be resentful?" Lin Shi asked. Fang Zhengkai smiled bitterly. "Of course they're resentful. But in times like these, this is the only way to survive. Don't pity them. They refuse to go outside. I'm only feeding them out of basic humanity." Lin Shi nodded. In his mind, Fang Zhengkai was a bit too soft. In the long run, Lin Tianrui's approach was the right one. Building a base requires everyone's effort. It's the apocalypse. No one gets to be a freeloader. Even though these freeloaders were only given a tiny amount of food each day, Lin Shi still felt it was a waste of rations. Because not only did these freeloaders bring zero benefit to the base, but seeing others eat well and dress warmly every day would make them feel unfairly treated. Slowly, jealousy and envy would fester. Over time, that pent-up resentment would be like a pressure cooker constantly hissing on a stove. One day, it would burn away their humanity and conscience, and then explode. The apocalypse wasn't a peaceful world. Useless people in the apocalypse simply had no backbone. But naturally, Lin Shi wasn't going to say any of this to Fang Zhengkai, a man he had just met. Otherwise, not only would Fang Zhengkai be unappreciative, but he would also think Lin Shi was cold-blooded and ruthless. Lin Shi followed Fang Zhengkai into a room that was larger than the others. "Have a seat." Fang Zhengkai led Lin Shi to a stainless steel chair. Lin Shi didn't want to waste time and cut straight to the chase. "Captain Fang, no need for pleasantries. I came here to ask for your help with something. I'll pay you with the appropriate supplies as compensation. Just say the word, Brother Lin. As long as it's within my power, I'll definitely help you out," Fang Zhengkai said, patting his chest. "I need to make a trip to Changbai Mountain. I want to ask if anyone here has lived near Changbai Mountain or passed through there, and if they can tell me about the situation in that area. Ah, I see. Fang Jinkai looked like he understood, secretly breathing a sigh of relief. As long as Lin Shi had no ulterior motives regarding the underground city, these minor requests were naturally not a problem. There's no need for supplies as payment. How about you just give me some information about the outside world instead, Brother Lin? Lin Shi nodded. Trading information for information. Very fair. Then wait here for a moment, Brother Lin. Fang Junkai stepped out of the room and gave orders to his subordinates outside. Finding the right people would take some time. At Fang Junkai's insistence, Lin Shi ended up having dinner with him. Dinner was a large platter of roasted meat. Judging by Fang Junkai's expression, it had been a long time since he'd eaten cooked meat. He ate heartily, his mouth smeared with grease. Every scrap of meat on the bones was gnawed clean, and even the bones themselves were chewed down to the marrow. The entire situation in the underground city was under the surveillance of Lin Shi's mental energy, so even though the meat wasn't exactly delicious, there was nothing suspicious about it. Lin Shi naturally wasn't worried. He just took a few bites and used the excuse of being full to let Fang Junkai finish the rest. About 3 hours later, Fang Junkai's subordinate reported from the door, "Leader, we've brought the people. Bring them in." As soon as Fang Junkai spoke, several people immediately squeezed into the room. There were still over a dozen people waiting at the door. "Captain Fang, these are all the people who have either passed through Changbai Mountain or know something about it." Ever since Lin Shi stepped into this underground city, he had smelled a pungent stench. Clearly, the survivors here weren't exactly clean. Especially after the apocalypse, towels and paper were precious commodities. To put it bluntly, these people probably used whatever was handy to wipe themselves. As those people entered the room, the stench immediately skyrocketed. For someone with a sharp sense of smell like Lin Shi, this was absolute torture. He instantly furrowed his brows. Fang Junkai was also repulsed by the smell, but he maintained his demeanor as a leader and said to Lin Shi, "Brother Lin, I'll have them come in one by one. Feel free to ask them whatever you need." After making the arrangements, Fang Junkai left to avoid arousing suspicion, though his departing footsteps seemed awfully hurried. Lin Shi didn't waste words and immediately started questioning the first person. "You've passed through Changbai Mountain, right? Do you know of any distinct structures or terrain features there?" Lin Shi consecutively questioned several people who had been to Changbai Mountain. Among these people, some had fuzzy memories, while others claimed to know it well but kept dodging his gaze, unable to look him in the eye. Hearing that anyone who provided useful information would be rewarded by Captain Fang, 3 of them deliberately lied. They were exposed and dragged out by Fang Junkai's subordinates. Until it was a young woman's turn. "You've passed through Changbai Mountain?" "Yes. My home used to be at the foot of Changbai Mountain, just a few kilometers away." Dai Xiao looked up at Lin Shi cautiously. Her entire body was filthy. Only her eyes were clear. She had chopped off her long hair herself because it was too hard to maintain in the apocalypse. Coupled with her tattered clothes, at first glance, it was almost impossible to tell if she was a boy or a girl. The girl's name was Dai Xiao. Before the apocalypse, her hometown was near Changbai Mountain. Because she had traveled far for work, she ended up stranded in the capital. Her family consisted of a younger brother who was still in school and a bedridden father. They all relied on Dai Xiao's monthly salary to survive. Ever since the apocalypse hit, Dai Xiao had wanted to go back countless times. But when the world ended, all the vehicles in the capital broke down, let alone planes or trains. Then came the massive snowstorm and the plummeting temperatures. She had absolutely no way to get home. Later on, the temperature kept dropping, food became scarcer, and terrifying evolved wild beasts began appearing outside. Dai Xiao couldn't possibly go outside. Just as she was about to freeze and starve to death, she was lucky enough to follow Fang Junkai's group to this underground city. Since then, she hadn't seen the sun. Even though this underground city had food, a lot of people still died in the beginning. Some couldn't adapt to the sudden drop in temperature and fell ill. Some were already frail and had no medicine to cure them. Some froze to death. And some couldn't accept reality, going mad and killing others. Even though she had already guessed in her heart that her father and younger brother were unlikely to have survived, Dai Xiao still wanted to go back and see for herself. Last night, She happened to overhear Fang Jinkai's subordinates looking for people from near Changbai Mountain to provide information. Relying on a year of waiting and observing the people in the city, Dai Xiaoro grasped this piece of information. Knowing that Fang Jinkai's guest needed to go to Changbai Mountain, she rushed over in a state of excitement. Her eyes showed anxiety and fear, but they were also brimming with eagerness. Do you know of any distinct structures or terrain features at Changbai Mountain? Lin Shi asked. I grew up there. No one knows that place better than I do, Dai Xiaoro said firmly. Lin Shi looked at the girl, waiting for her to continue. But the two just stared at each other. Dai Xiaoro only said she was familiar with Changbai Mountain and then fell silent. Lin Shi frowned, his patience wearing thin. Tell me, what architectural features does Changbai Mountain have? What's the scenery like? What's the shape of the mountain? What landmarks are around it? Why you don't want me to go with you? As long as you take me, I'll help you find it, Dai Xiaoro replied naively. She still thought Lin Shi needed a guide, and she considered herself the prime candidate. More importantly, she wanted to go home. Even if her family was no longer there, she absolutely had to go see it for herself. Lin Shi sized the girl up and scoffed. Do you have any idea how cold it is outside right now? You, a Tier 1 evolver, would be dead in less than half a day out there. Dai Xiaoro didn't know. She hadn't been outside in over half a year. How cold is it? It's night right now, so it's around minus 120 degrees. Even during the day, it's about minus 100. I can handle it. Dai Xiaoro had actually been outside before, which was when her abilities had awakened. It was freezing out there, but the origin beasts were even more dangerous. Because of the origin beasts, Dai Xiaoro had temporarily given up on the idea of returning. But Lin Shi couldn't possibly bring such a burden along. He said bluntly, I don't want to carry dead weight. Hurry up and tell me the situation at Changbai Mountain, and I'll give you some benefits. Otherwise what? Dai Xiaoro stepped back in fear. Lin Shi's eyes turned cold as he said indifferently, otherwise, get the hell out. Next, Dai Xiaoro bit her lip and walked out, full of reluctance. After that, the others came in. Finally, a middle-aged man provided Lin Shi with a piece of information. There was a heavenly lake at the peak of Changbai Mountain. This man had been to Changbai Mountain and seen the lake, so he described its shape and appearance to Lin Shi. Even though Changbai Mountain was definitely covered in snow by now, Lin Shi could use his mental energy to sweep the entire mountain peak. As long as there was a mountain in Jilin province with a lake at its summit, it was highly likely to be the peak of Changbai Mountain. The people who came after talked about rice paddies and villages at the foot of the mountain, but without any distinct landmarks, Lin Shi simply dismissed them. In the dead of night, a blizzard suddenly struck. Blizzards were a frequent occurrence in the north, so Lin Shi was no longer surprised. Once he was done asking questions, Lin Shi sent these people away. Fang Jinkai arranged a relatively clean room for Lin Shi to stay in. Although the conditions were crude, Lin Shi had experienced his past life, so he didn't find this place much different and gladly accepted. With the heavy snow falling late into the night, he didn't plan on going out again. He could set off for Jilin province tomorrow morning, so he didn't bother looking for another place to rest. All night, Lin Shi sat in the room, resting with his eyes closed. The next day, Lin Shi opened his eyes, a look of resignation flashing across them. The blizzard was still raging on, even fiercer than before. Fang Jinkai had noticed the situation in the middle of the night and had already sent people to clear the snow at the exit. This was the second time. Just then, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Lin Shi stood up and walked out of the room. Fang Jinkai, calling you Captain Fang is giving you face. Don't think you can just boss us around. All this time, we've been deceived by you. We're starving and freezing to death, while you're living it up with the rich. The supplies here don't belong to you alone. They belong to everyone. Don't be so greedy. We just want enough to eat. To survive. The survivors in the underground city swarmed in front of Fang Jinkai's room, loudly protesting. They only received one ration a day, at noon. That ration was barely enough to keep them alive, leaving them in a constant state of starvation. Yesterday, there was roasted meat. Even though Fang Jinkai's subordinates had tried to hide it, in this poorly ventilated underground city, even the faintest scent of meat was enough to be noticed, let alone an entire platter of mouth-watering roasted meat. The smell of roasted meat was the straw that broke the camel's back. After brewing for a night, their resentment had reached its boiling point. With one person leading the charge, the other survivors swarmed over, surrounding Fang Zhenkai's room and demanding food. Fang Zhenkai glared angrily at the crowd of people who usually did nothing but open their mouths to demand food. He explained, "The roasted meat last night was because we had an esteemed guest. That's why I brought it out to host him. Besides, my team members risked their lives to hunt that meat. It has nothing to do with you." "What do you mean it has nothing to do with us?" a middle-aged woman in the crowd yelled, pointing a finger at Fang Zhenkai. "If we hadn't saved up our rations, would your lapdogs have the strength to go hunt monsters? If I gotta eat my fill every day, I'd have the strength to hunt too." "Yeah, exactly. We're only too weak to hunt because we're starving. We saved our food so you guys could go hunting, and you won't even share the meat. That's too selfish. You used to be a police officer. Is this how a police officer acts? You're a heartless beast." Her words resonated with many people. Fang Zhenkai was so furious he clenched his fists. "When the team was formed, I made it perfectly clear. As long as you join the team, go out to scavenge for supplies, and hunt monsters, you'll get to eat your fill every day. But back then, most people were terrified of the outside world, so very few signed up. Therefore, these claims were utterly shameless." Someone else in the crowd spoke up. "Furthermore, that esteemed guest you hosted last night is clearly just some brat from who knows where. Could he be Captain Fang's relative?" "Yeah, what esteemed guest? It's obviously just an excuse. If you won't give us food today, we'll take it ourselves." "That's right. Kill us if you have the guts. Let's grab it together." Fang Zhenkai immediately ordered his subordinates to stop them. But because of the massive blizzard last night, Fang Zhenkai had just sent quite a few people up to clear the snow. The underground city was short on more than half its manpower. He hadn't expected these survivors to seize the opportunity. Or rather, they had planned this all along, just waiting for the right moment. The men charged forward, breaking through Fang Zhenkai's team's defenses, and rushed toward the food storage room. Most of them figured there was safety in numbers. With so many people grabbing food together, could Fang Zhenkai really kill them all? Once they snatched the food, as long as they ate it quickly and hid it well, even if Fang Zhenkai wanted to take it back, he wouldn't be able to recover much. Lin Shi stood outside the crowd, observing everything. So Fang Zhenkai was a police officer before the apocalypse. He looked like an upright, righteous cop. No wonder he took in these useless ticking time bombs. Fang Zhenkai had been too lenient with the survivors from the start, which bred their resentment. If he had used strong measures to manage the food from the very beginning, distributing it fairly based on labor, and cutting off those who did nothing, today's incident would never have happened. These survivors weren't thinking straight either. If they ate all the reserves, the people responsible for protecting the underground city and hunting origin beasts would starve. No matter how righteous or soft-hearted Fang Zhenkai was, he would eventually have to harden his heart and abandon these burdens. Anyone who was too kind would eventually be turned cold by the apocalypse. Sure enough, watching these survivors storm the food storage to loot, watching them use sharp weapons to attack his unprovoking team members, Fang Zhenkai's eyes shifted from hesitation to absolute resolve. One of the survivors, for some reason, felt annoyed seeing Lin Shi dressed so cleanly and having eaten roasted meat. Taking advantage of the chaos, he gripped a sharp knife and lunged at Lin Shi, who was just standing there watching. Lin Shi hadn't wanted to meddle in other people's business, but since someone was actively seeking death, he wasn't going to show any mercy. Lin Shi grabbed the man's knife-wielding hand and twisted it hard. A blood-curdling scream rang out as his entire arm was snapped. Immediately after, Lin Shi cleanly snapped his neck. The rowdy, chaotic crowd suddenly fell dead silent. Lin Shi expressionlessly tossed the corpse to the ground and swept a cold gaze over the rest of them. No one dared to step anywhere near Lin Shi. Lin Shi's decisiveness also ignited Fang Zhenkai's resolve. He roared an order: "Anyone who dares to fight for food, kill them without mercy." The riot ended after more than a dozen people were killed. At first, the survivors didn't believe Fang Zhenkai was serious, thinking he was just trying to scare them. But when Fang Zhenkai personally killed the first person who grabbed food, and the other team members followed suit, the survivors finally felt true terror. Amidst agonizing wails and screams, they scrambled back to their rooms. Fang Zhenkai had the bodies cleared away, then invited Lin Shi to his room. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, Brother Lin." Lin Shi shook his head, saying nothing. If Feng Zhengkai hadn't taken action now, this underground city would have collapsed sooner or later. Although Feng Zhengkai had used forceful measures to crush the riot, he had planted seeds of hatred in the hearts of these survivors. If not handled well, the underground city wouldn't last much longer anyway. Brother Lin, could you tell me about the situation outside? Are there any survivor bases in other places? Lin Shi told Feng Zhengkai about Sha City and the other cities he had seen. How is Sha City managed? Could you tell me, Brother Lin? Feng Zhengkai asked in a humble tone.